No isn't the worst thing a girl can say, but the worst thing a girl could do is to pretend to like you or love you, get you attached, treat you like her boyfriend, and tell you she's not ready for a relationship. Shawty just played you like she's playing Animal Crossing. If there was an Olympic sport for getting played, best believe you would have gotten a gold or bronze medal. Y'all didn't even get past the talking stage. She dragged it out like this was 13 reasons why. If this was me, finding her would be as easy as trying to find the one piece. This type of disrespect is something you can't tolerate. The woman species now makes your blood boil. Talking to girls romantically is something you don't even want to hear about. This is the type of pain and heartbreak that will have you up at 3 a.m. doing 3 sets of 20 push-ups while thinking of ways to change your life around. This is the type of pain that makes you want to get rich and conquer the world. After this type of foolery, she might have turned you nonchalant. Now every girl you meet after her suffers. It's like she broke the way you loved and trusted. This is honestly most of us guys' lore. A lot of us aren't born nonchalant. It's usually someone who makes us feel that we need to be this way to protect ourselves from the way we were once hurt. This is why I always say don't give away your love and your heart too soon. Then it could all be a game of poker, and these girls are waiting for you to show your hand so they can crush you and take you for everything you have. After that kind of situation, you don't just move on like nothing happened. People act like you can just charge it to the game, but that game took something from you. It took the version of you that believed words matched actions. It took the version of you that assumed consistency meant interest, that effort meant intention. And once that's gone, it doesn't come back easily. You start noticing the shift in yourself. You don't text first as much anymore. You hesitate before opening up. Compliments feel suspicious. Affection feels temporary. You're no longer asking, do I like her? You're asking, is this even real? And that question follows you into every new connection, even with people who haven't done anything wrong. That's the unfair part. One person plays with your feelings, and suddenly everyone after them has to deal with the damage. You become guarded, distant, almost emotionally lazy, not because you don't care, but because caring once cost you too much. You learn that giving your heart too early can turn into a lesson you never asked for. And late at night, that's when it really hits. When the distractions are gone, when you're alone with your thoughts, that's when the anger shows up, not just at her, but at yourself, for ignoring the red flags, for believing potential instead of patterns, for staying when deep down something felt off. That anger fuels change, but it can also harden you if you're not careful. A lot of guys turn that pain into motivation. Gym sessions at ungodly hours, obsessing over goals, wanting to level up in every area of life. And while growth is good, it's important to recognize where it's coming from. Are you improving because you want more for yourself? Because you're trying to prove you were worth choosing? That experience becomes part of your story, your lore, not to victimize you, but to explain why you move the way you do now, why you don't fall as fast, why you keep your guard up, why you test people before trusting them. You weren't born this way. Someone taught you to protect yourself. And the real lesson isn't to stop loving. It's to stop giving your heart to people who haven't earned access to it yet. What really messes with you is realizing she probably didn't think it was that deep. To her, it was just talking, just vibes, just something to pass the time. But to you, it was hope. It was imagination. It was planning things in your head you never even said out loud. And that imbalance is where the damage happens. One person is casually passing time, the other is slowly building attachment. You replay moments looking for answers. The good mornings, the late replies that still felt warm, the way she acted like she cared without ever committing to it, and you start asking yourself if you imagined it all, if you read too much into things, if you're the problem for feeling deeply in a world where people stay shallow on purpose. That's when trust starts cracking, not just trust in others, but trust in yourself. You stop believing your intuition because last time it led you straight into disappointment. So now you second guess everything. Is she flirting or just being nice? Does she actually like me or just like the attention? You become hyper-aware, constantly scanning for signs that history is about to repeat itself. And the worst part is how it rewires your expectations. You go into new situations already bracing for impact, already assuming it won't last, already preparing for the moment they pull back and say they're not ready. So instead of enjoying the present, you're always waiting for the drop, always half gone even when you're still there. This is how people become emotionally unavailable without meaning to, not because they don't want love, but because love once felt like a setup, like something that was offered just to be taken away. So you start protecting yourself in quiet ways. You don't get excited too fast, you don't express how much you care. You keep things surface level until someone proves they're different. But here's the truth, nobody tells you. What happened to you wasn't weakness. It was sincerity, meeting someone who didn't know what they wanted. And that doesn't mean you should stop being sincere. It just means you have to be be more selective with who you give that version of yourself to. After that kind of situation, something shifts in you. You're not loud about it, you don't announce it, but you feel it in the way you move. You stop leading with your heart and start leading with caution. You don't text first as much, you don't double text. You don't let yourself get excited over potential anymore. You tell yourself it's maturity, but deep down, it's fear wearing a calmer face. You start believing that caring less is safer, that being detached is smarter, that if you never let anyone get too close, they can't pull the rug from under you again. So you keep people at arm's length, you flirt without intention, you talk without expectation, you convince yourself this is control, but really it's armor. And sometimes you miss the old you, the version of you that loved freely, that didn't overthink every reply, that didn't feel embarrassed for being excited about someone. You miss how deeply you used to feel before it backfired. You don't know how to go back without risking the same pain again. That's how one situation can bleed into every future one. You start punishing people who haven't done anything wrong yet, not intentionally but subconsciously. You assume they'll leave, assume they'll switch up, assume they'll say they're not ready once you get attached, so you stay one step ahead emotionally, just in case. And the scary part is how normalized this becomes. People praise you for being nonchalant, for not caring too much, for being unbothered. They don't see the nights you still replay things in your head. They don't see how guarded you've become. They don't see how badly you still want something real, even though you act like you don't. But here's the part you need to hear. Becoming colder isn't healing, it's surviving. And survival is not the same as growth. You didn't lose because you cared. You lost because you cared about someone who wasn't capable of matching it. One day, someone will come into your life and your walls will confuse them. They'll feel the distance, they'll wonder why you hesitate, and you'll have to decide whether you're going to keep letting the past decide how you love, or whether you're ready to risk feeling again, this time with someone who actually means it. Here's the truth, nobody really prepares you for. The hardest part isn't getting played, it's what happens after, when you meet someone new who actually treats you right, and you don't know how to receive it. Their consistency feels suspicious. Their interest feels too good to be true. When they text back fast instead of feeling secure, your mind starts asking, what's the catch? Because your brain remembers patterns, remembers how attention turned into attachment, and attachment turned into disappointment. So now every good thing feels temporary. You don't relax into love anymore, you brace for impact. You're always waiting for the switch up, the moment they pull away, the moment they say they're not ready, the moment you realize you were just another phase to them. And it's exhausting, because part of you wants to love again the way you used to. Fully, honestly, without holding back. But another part of you is screaming not to, telling you that being vulnerable is dangerous, that letting someone see you is how you get hurt, so you stay halfway in, halfway out. Enough to not be alone, but not enough to be devastated again. That's why you start confusing peace with boredom. Healthy love feels quiet compared to chaos. There's no guessing games, no mixed signals, no emotional roller coaster. And because you got used to inconsistency, stability feels unfamiliar, almost wrong. You catch yourself thinking, why isn't this hurting? Why am I not anxious? And that's when you realize how much damage was done, but healing doesn't mean you'll never be cautious again. It means learning when caution is protecting you, and when it's sabotaging something good. It means unlearning the belief that love has to hurt to be real. It means reminding yourself that not everyone is playing a game, even if someone once did. You're not broken for being guarded, you're human. You adapted. Don't let one person's inability to love you properly rewrite who you are at your core, because the version of you that loved deeply wasn't weak. That version was brave, and one day when it's safe again, you'll recognize that feeling, and you'll know it's finally real. What nobody tells you is that after being hurt like that, you don't become heartless overnight. You become careful. You start analyzing everything, tone, timing, energy. You replay conversations in your head, not because you're obsessed, but because you're trying to protect yourself from ever feeling that stupid again. You promise yourself you'll never miss the signs next time. So when someone new comes around, you don't jump in. You test the waters. You pull back just to see if they'll step forward. You stop texting first, not because you don't care, but because you're scared of caring more again. You don't want to be the only one invested. You don't want to be the one waiting ever again. And sometimes that defense mechanism costs you something real. The person in front of you isn't the one who hurt you. They're not playing games. They're not keeping you around for attention. They're just trying to get to know you, but your heart doesn't know the difference yet. It's still in survival mode. You might even catch yourself pushing them away emotionally, acting distant, acting unbothered, acting like you don't care as much as you actually do, because caring openly once led to pain, and you don't want to relive that lesson. You tell yourself you're just being smart now, more mature, more controlled. Deep down, There's a part of you that misses loving without fear, and that's the conflict. You want connection, but you don't want to bleed for it. You want intimacy, but only if it doesn't cost you your peace. So you move slow, you keep walls up, you tell yourself if it's meant to be, they'll stay. And if they leave, at least you didn't give them everything. Just know this. Healing isn't about rushing back into who you were before. It's about choosing who you want to be now. Someone wiser, someone more aware, but still open, still capable of real love. Because the goal was never to become cold, it was to stop giving your warmth to people who couldn't handle it. Here's the truth. Most people never say out loud. Becoming guarded doesn't mean you lost your ability to love. It means you finally learned your worth. There's a difference. You didn't harden because you're bitter. You hardened because you had to survive something that broke you when you were genuine. You remember how freely you used to give, how you didn't hesitate, how you showed up with your whole chest. No hesitation, no backup plan. You didn't measure effort, you didn't keep score, you just loved. And when that got taken advantage of, it didn't just hurt your heart, it shook your identity, it made you question if being that open was a mistake. So now you hesitate, you don't open up right away, you don't trauma dump, you don't promise things too early. You don't let people know how deeply you feel until they've proven they're safe. And that's not weakness, that's discernment, that's growth. But sometimes people misunderstand that version of you. They call you distant, nonchalant, emotionless. They don't see the emotional discipline it took to become this way. They don't see the nights you had to teach yourself how to let go, how to sit with silence, how to stop chasing explanations that were never coming. And yeah, it gets lonely sometimes because not everyone has the patience to get past your walls. Not everyone understands that consistency matters more to you now than words. That effort means more than promises. That actions are the only language you really trust. The right person won't rush you. They won't demand access to parts of you they haven't earned. They won't punish you for protecting yourself. They'll understand that loving you means moving at your pace, showing up even when you don't ask, being steady when you're cautious. You're not broken. You're recalibrated. You didn't lose your softness. You just learned to aim it better. And one day, when someone proves they can handle your heart without hurting it, you'll feel it, because you'll want to open up again. Not out of fear of losing them, but because it finally feels safe to stay. What people don't realize is that the walls you built weren't meant to keep love out. They were meant to keep the wrong people from walking in and wrecking everything again. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be distant. You became distant after explaining yourself one too many times to people who never listened, after forgiving things you never should have had to forgive, after loving someone who treated your heart like something disposable. There was a version of you that believed effort would always be met halfway, that if you just loved harder, communicated better, stayed patient longer, things would work out. And when that belief collapsed, it didn't collapse quietly, it shattered, because you weren't just mourning a person, you were mourning the version of yourself that thought love was always safe. So now you watch patterns, you notice energy shifts, you pay attention to how people show up when it's inconvenient, not when it's easy. You don't get attached to potential anymore. You don't romanticize promises. You wait to see if words and actions line up, and if they don't, you detach without explaining yourself the way you used to. Some people call that cold, but it's not. It's clarity. You're tired of giving the benefit of the doubt to people who already showed you who they were. You're tired of staying loyal to people who only kept you around when it benefited them. You're tired of feeling stupid for caring too much, so you stopped overextending. You stopped proving. You stopped begging to be chosen. And yeah, sometimes you miss how deeply you used to feel. Sometimes you miss how excited you got, how hopeful you were. But you also remember the crash, the nights you questioned your worth, the way your chest felt heavy for weeks, the way you blamed yourself for someone else's inability to love you properly. That's why you don't rush now. That's why you don't fall fast. That's why you protect your peace like it's sacred, because you know what it costs to rebuild yourself from emotional ruins. And the truth is, the right person won't see your caution as a flaw. They'll see it as proof that you value yourself. They'll be patient enough to earn your trust, consistent enough to soften your guard, safe enough to remind you that not everyone comes to take. You're not afraid of love, you're afraid of losing yourself again. And that fear makes sense. Here's the part nobody tells you when you go through something like that. The fact that you're guarded now doesn't mean you're broken. It means you survived, it means you learned, it means you finally stopped pouring yourself into people who treated your heart like something they could pick up and put down whenever they felt like it. You didn't lose your ability to love. You just stopped giving it to people who didn't know how to hold it. Deep down, that soft version of you still exists. The one who loves deeply, the one who shows up, the one who means what they say and stays when things get uncomfortable. You didn't kill that part of yourself. You just hid it, locked it away until someone proves they're safe enough to see it again. And that's growth, because love isn't about giving everything immediately anymore. It's about watching how someone treats your time, your effort, your vulnerability. It's about noticing if they stay consistent when there's nothing to gain, if they choose you when it's inconvenient, if they respect your boundaries instead of testing how far they can push them. You're not asking for perfection now. You're asking for honesty, for effort that doesn't disappear, for reassurance that doesn't feel forced, for a connection that doesn't make you feel anxious, confused, or small. And the right person won't make you feel like you have to guard yourself forever. They won't rush you. They won't pressure you to open up faster than you're ready. They'll understand why you hesitate, why you question, why you move slower than before, because they won't see your past as baggage. They'll see it as context. One day, someone will come into your life, and instead of triggering your fears, they'll quiet them. Instead of making you overthink, they'll bring peace. Instead of making you feel like you have to protect yourself, they'll make you feel protected. Until then, it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away faster. It's okay to protect your heart. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You're just done bleeding for people who never planned to stay. And when love comes again, it won't break you, because this time, you know your worth. I found out what she really thought of me, and I wish I didn't, because in my head, it was different. I thought she respected me. I thought she valued me. I thought the way I showed up actually meant something to her. But the truth, it wasn't what I believed. And it didn't come out in a direct way. Not a conversation. Not something she sat me down and said. It came out indirectly. Through things I wasn't supposed to hear. Through how she spoke when I wasn't around. And that's when it hit me. The version of me in her head wasn't the same as the version of me I thought she saw. At first, I didn't want to believe it because it didn't match how she acted around me. With me, she seemed calm, interested, like she actually cared. But what I heard didn't sound like that version of her at all. It sounded detached, like I wasn't that important, like I was just there. And that's what messes with you. When someone treats you one way to your face and thinks something completely different behind it, because now you don't know what was real, the way she talked to you, or the way she talked about you. And once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. Every memory started changing. Moments that felt genuine started feeling questionable. Things she said started sounding different in my head, because now I was looking at everything through a new lens, a more honest one. And the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. Why sometimes her energy felt off. Why sometimes I felt like I was trying harder. Why something always felt slightly uneven. I just didn't want to accept it back then. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe they see you differently than you see them. You want to believe it's mutual, that the respect is equal, that the value is the same on both sides. But it wasn't. Not really. Because if she truly saw me the way I thought she did, she wouldn't have spoken about me like that. She wouldn't have minimized what I was giving. She wouldn't have treated my presence like something replaceable. And that's the part that hits your ego. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way. Because now you're not just dealing with losing her. You're dealing with realizing how little you meant in her perspective. While you were taking her seriously, she wasn't taking you the same way, and that imbalance, it hurts more than the ending. For a while I started questioning myself, like maybe I misread everything. Maybe I thought it was deeper than it actually was. Maybe I gave too much meaning to something that wasn't built to hold it. Because when someone sees you as less than what you believed, it makes you feel like you got it wrong. But here's what I had to understand. Just because she didn't value me properly, doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. The problem wasn't who I was, it was how she saw me. And you can't control that. You can show up right, you can be real, you can be consistent, but if someone already has a limited view of you, they're going to treat you based on that, no matter how you show up. And that's why nothing I did changed it, because the issue wasn't effort, it was perception. Once I understood that, the pain started shifting. Because now it wasn't about trying to prove something to her anymore. It was about realizing I was giving energy to someone who didn't even see it properly. And that's a different kind of clarity, because it makes you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood by someone who already decided how they see you. And honestly, I'm glad I found out. even though it hurt, because I would have kept going, thinking it was deeper than it actually was, thinking she valued me the way I valued her, and that would have kept me stuck. But the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, it frees you. So yeah, then I found out what she really thought of me, and it wasn't what I expected, but now I see it clearly. The right person doesn't make you question your value. They don't talk about you like you're nothing. They don't treat you like you're replaceable. They see you fully, clearly, and they move accordingly. So I'm not mad at what I found out. I'm just glad I didn't stay blind to it, because now I know one thing for sure. I'd rather know the truth than keep believing something that was never real. Don't care how corny it sounds, I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half interest. Just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers, where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying. It can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not going to dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person. You lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, I don't get your hopes up, protect your care less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly. You don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection. You're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary ordinary moments into memories, the kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway. When you say you want that kind of love, you're not talking about perfection, you're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending, you're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company, you're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do, all in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing. No proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half-loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost, one thing never leaves: your capacity to love. You don't lose it, even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it. And when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. So no, the lover boy in you doesn't die, he just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. The first kind of pain is caring deeply and watching it backfire. Not because you expect anything in return, but because caring is just who you are. You show up without being asked. You check in on people who never think to check on you. You stay up late listening to problems that were never yours to carry. You give your time, your energy, your patience, not to be praised, just because you care, and somehow that becomes the thing that hurts you. Because some people don't meet kindness with care. They get comfortable with it. They start expecting it. They stop noticing it. Your effort becomes routine. Your consistency becomes invisible until one day you don't show up the same way anymore. That's when they finally notice. That's when they ask what's wrong. But by then you're already tired. Tired of explaining your intentions. Tired of proving your heart. Tired of giving pieces of yourself to people who never stay long enough to understand what it costs you. It's not that you regret caring, you just wish having a good heart didn't hurt this much. And maybe the hardest truth is realizing that loving deeply doesn't guarantee you'll be loved the same way. But that doesn't make your softness a weakness. It just means it needs protection. Don't stop caring. Just be careful who you hand that kind of love to. When you're the one who cares deeply, you usually become not the reliable one, the one people vent to, the one people lean on, the one who always answers. You're dependable in ways people don't even notice anymore. They assume you'll be there, assume you'll understand, assume you'll forgive, so they stop asking how you are, not out of cruelty, but because consistency gets mistaken for endless capacity. You start carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours alone. Other people's stress, other people's problems, other people's moods, and you hold it all quietly because you don't want to be a burden the way you never see them as one. But over time, something shifts. You feel tired in a deeper way, not just physically, emotionally. You notice how rarely someone shows up for you the way you show up for them, how quickly your needs get overlooked, how easily your exhaustion goes unseen. And that's when it starts to hurt differently, because you didn't ask for much, you just wanted effort to meet effort, care to meet care, but instead you became the place people take from without realizing they're draining you, and slowly being the strong one starts to feel like being the forgotten one. Eventually something changes, not in a dramatic way. You don't announce it, you don't make a scene, you just stop giving the same way you used to. You reply a little later, you don't over-explain anymore. You stop stretching yourself thin just to be available, and that's when people notice. Not when you were exhausted, not when you were drained, not when you were giving everything. They notice when you pull back. Suddenly they ask what's wrong. Suddenly they feel the distance. Suddenly they miss the version of you that was always there. And that part hurts because it shows you something you didn't want to see. They didn't miss you. They missed the access. They missed the comfort you provided, the effort you gave without question, the way you made things easier for them. So when you stop showing up like that, it feels personal to them. But for you, it wasn't about punishment. It was about survival. You didn't stop caring. You just stop bleeding quietly, and realizing that is both painful and freeing because it teaches you this: anyone who only notices your absence was never really paying attention to your presence. When you finally start pulling back, the hardest part isn't the silence, it's the guilt. You feel like you're doing something wrong just by protecting yourself. You second guess every boundary. You wonder if you're being cold, if you're being selfish, if you're changing. Because when you spent your life being the one who gives, rest feels like laziness, distance feels like cruelty, and saying no feels like failure. You weren't taught how to have limits. You were taught how to endure. So the moment you stop overextending, your nervous system panics. It tells you to explain yourself, to soften it, to give just a little more so no one feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Boundaries don't feel good at first because you're used to being useful, not protected. You learned that love meant access, that care meant availability, that being needed was the same as being valued. So when you remove access, it feels like you're taking something away, but you're not. You're just finally keeping something for yourself. And that discomfort, that's not you doing something wrong. That's you breaking a pattern that was costing you more than you realized. People who care deeply often confuse love with sacrifice. They believe loving someone means giving more, trying harder, holding on longer than they should. They tell themselves, if I'm patient enough, they'll notice. If I stay kind, it'll balance out. If I keep showing up, it'll be worth it. But love was never meant to cost you your peace. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being good meant being accommodating. That being loving meant putting yourself last. So you stayed quiet about your needs. You ignored your exhaustion. You told yourself it wasn't that bad as long as everyone else was okay. But sacrifice without reciprocity doesn't make love deeper. It makes it heavier. Because when you're always the one adjusting, the relationship stops being shared. It becomes one-sided. And the scariest part is people can get used to that version of you. They don't ask if it's costing you anything. They just assume you'll keep paying the price until one day you realize love shouldn't feel like self-abandonment. Caring deeply doesn't mean giving endlessly, and loving someone should never require you to disappear in the process. There's a moment when something finally clicks. You get tired of proving that you're genuine, tired of explaining your intentions, tired of showing people your heart just so they can decide whether it deserves care. So you stop performing, you don't overextend anymore, you don't chase reassurance, you don't give more just to feel secure. And at first that feels uncomfortable because you're not used to being this guarded. You're used to leading with softness even when it costs you. But protecting your heart isn't the same as closing it. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming selective. You start noticing who respects your limits and who only liked you when you were endlessly available. You see who adjusts with you, instead of expecting you to bend every time, and that's when you realize something important. You don't need to prove your kindness. The right people will feel it without needing to take advantage of it. Protecting your heart doesn't make you less loving. It just means you're finally loving yourself too. Once you stop overgiving, you start noticing something clearly. Not everyone reacts the same way. Some people get uncomfortable, they push back, they ask why you're different now. They miss the version of you that gave without limits and never asked for anything back. But others adjust. They respect the boundary. They meet you halfway. They don't make you feel guilty for needing space or balance. And that difference matters because it shows you who valued you and who only valued what you provided. The right people don't punish you for protecting your heart. They don't withdraw when you stop overextending. They lean in. They check on you. They notice your effort because it's no longer automatic. They give without keeping score. And for the first time, caring doesn't feel draining. It feels mutual. You realize you don't have to shrink your heart to keep people around. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be worthy of love. The people meant for you won't disappear when you stop bleeding quietly. They'll stay because they never needed you to hurt in order to feel close. At the end of all this, you realize something important. Your softness was never the problem. Caring deeply wasn't a mistake. Being attentive wasn't wrong. Showing up wasn't foolish. The pain came from giving that level of care to people who didn't know how to hold it. Because the right people don't drain you. They don't get comfortable taking. They don't wait until you pull back to finally notice your value. They see it while you're still giving, and they give back. With the right people, your kindness doesn't become invisible. Your effort doesn't become expected. Your heart doesn't become something to manage. It becomes appreciated. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to overextend. You don't have to lose pieces of yourself just to stay connected. Your softness becomes strength because it's met with care, not entitlement. And that's when you understand the goal was never to stop caring. It was to stop pouring your heart into places that couldn't return it. So keep your softness. Just place it wisely, because in the right hands, your heart won't hurt this much. It'll finally feel safe. I don't ask for much. I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need public displays. I don't need dramatic promises, but sometimes I catch myself wondering, do you even love me? Or do you just love the role I play in your life? Because there's a difference. Loving someone means you care about their heart. Liking what they do for you means you care about their presence, and those are not the same thing. I'm the easy one to love. I don't argue much. I don't complain often. Try to understand before reacting. I adjust. I compromise. I give space when needed. And sometimes I wonder if that's the problem, because when you're low maintenance, people forget maintenance is still required. Love isn't just staying, it's how you stay. Do you check in on my feelings without me hinting at them? Do you notice when my energy shifts? Do you protect my heart the same way I protect yours? Or do you just assume I'm fine because I don't break down in front of you? I think what hurts the most is not being unloved. It's being loved passively. Loved when it's convenient, loved when you need comfort, loved when I'm strong for you, but quiet when I need the same intensity back. That kind of love feels unbalanced, and imbalance turns into doubt. Sometimes I don't need more affection, I need clarity. Clarity in actions, clarity in effort, clarity in consistency. Because love shouldn't feel seasonal, it shouldn't spike when you're lonely and fade when you're comfortable. It should be stable, not loud, stable. I've realized something. If I have to constantly question whether I'm loved, then something is missing. Not necessarily feelings, but expression. Because real love doesn't leave you in confusion. It reassures you without you begging for it. It shows up without you scheduling it. It protects your peace instead of disturbing it. And maybe you do love me. Maybe you just love differently. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. If your version of love doesn't make me feel secure, then it's incomplete, because love isn't just about what you feel internally. It's about what I experience externally. I don't want to beg to feel valued. I don't want to explain why consistency matters. I don't want to teach someone how to treat me with care. If I have to convince you to show up for me properly, that's not partnership, that's negotiation. And love shouldn't feel like negotiation. The scary part is this: I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to stay somewhere where I feel half chosen. Because half love is heavy, it keeps you close enough to hope but far enough to doubt, and doubt slowly eats at your confidence. So do you even love me? Maybe the better question is, do I feel loved consistently? Do I feel prioritized, protected, considered? Because love shouldn't feel like a mystery. It shouldn't feel like something I have to decode. If I'm loved, I should know. Not because you say it once, but because you show it daily. And if I ever have to keep asking myself whether I'm loved, that might mean I deserve a love that doesn't make me question it at all. Requited love is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just sits with you. It's loving someone who laughs with you, but never looks at you the way you look at them. They're comfortable around you. They trust you. They tell you things. And every time they talk about someone else, you smile, while something inside you cracks just a little more. You learn how to swallow words before they escape, compliments you never say, feelings you never confess, because deep down you already know the answer, so you love them quietly. You notice everything about them, their habits, their moods, the small details nobody else pays attention to, knowing full well you'll never live in their memory the way they live in yours. Somehow you convince yourself it's okay, that being close to them, even like this, is better than being without them at all. You give without expecting, you care without being chosen, you love without being loved back, and that hurts in ways you can't explain, but unrequited love teaches you something too. It shows you how deep your heart really is, how much you're capable of feeling. even when nothing is returned. Just don't disappear inside someone who can't meet you where you are, because one day someone will, and they'll give back everything you once gave away in silence. The hardest part about unrequited love isn't just that they don't feel the same, it's that they're close enough to keep the hope alive. They don't reject you outright, they don't shut the door, they just exist in your life. They text you, they lean on you, they laugh with you, and every small moment feels like maybe you're not imagining it. So you hold on. You tell yourself you're being patient. That timing is the issue, that one day they'll see what you feel so clearly, but deep down, you know you're waiting for something they never promised. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because unrequited love doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like unfinished business. You don't walk away angry, you walk away confused. You wonder if you should have said more, if you should have been quieter, if you waited too long, or tried too hard, and instead of letting go, you stay emotionally tethered, not because you're weak, but because your heart hasn't been given a clean ending, so it keeps hoping, keeps replaying moments, keeps searching for signs that maybe you still matter to them in that way, and that hope is what keeps the pain alive. You begin to wonder why you're always the one feeling more, why you're always the one waiting, why love seems so easy for others but feels just out of reach for you. You start shrinking your needs, telling yourself you don't want much anyway, convincing yourself that loving quietly is enough, but it's not, because caring without being chosen slowly teaches your heart that it should settle for less. You catch yourself doing things just to stay close, being extra understanding, always available, always forgiving. Not because you're weak, but because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away completely. So you accept crumbs and call it connection, and the longer this goes on, the more invisible you start to feel, not just to them, but to yourself. You forget what it feels like to be desired, to be someone's first choice, to be loved out loud, and that's the quiet danger of unrequited love. It doesn't just hurt you, it slowly teaches you to disappear. There's a reason unrequited love is so hard to walk away from. Not just love, it's anticipation. You live in the space of almost chosen, almost wanted, almost enough. Your brain starts clinging to small moments. A long conversation, a shared laugh, a look that might mean something, and those moments keep you hooked, because when love isn't returned, your mind fills in the gaps with possibility. You imagine what could be instead of facing what is. And every time you think about letting go, you feel like you're giving up on a future that was never actually promised. So you stay hopeful, you stay available, you stay emotionally invested, not because it feels good, but because walking away feels like loss, even though nothing was ever yours. That's the trap. Unrequited love keeps you chasing closure from someone who doesn't know they're holding it, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to separate love from longing. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that believed it might work. At some point you feel it, the imbalance. You realize you're giving more than you're receiving, and then emotionally, mentally, quietly, you're investing energy into someone who isn't investing back. You plan around them, you think about them, you hold space for them, and they just live their life. That's when it starts to hurt differently. Not sharp pain, but exhaustion. You're tired of wondering, tired of hoping, tired of pretending you're okay with crumbs. You notice how much of yourself is tied up in someone who doesn't even know how deeply you care. And for the first time, you ask yourself a hard question. If nothing changes, then how long can I keep doing this? Because loving someone in silence means you never get reassurance, never get clarity, never get chosen, and slowly, it teaches your heart that effort doesn't lead to safety. That love means waiting, that closeness means sacrifice, and that's not fair to you. Love isn't supposed to drain you, it isn't supposed to make you feel invisible, it isn't supposed to cost you your sense of worth. And realizing that is the beginning of letting go, even if your heart isn't ready yet. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels wrong. It feels like you're giving up on someone you care about, like you're betraying something that meant a lot to you, even if it was never returned. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Should I just keep loving them quietly like before? Because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing the hope you've been holding on to. And hope is hard to release. You've built routines around them, emotions around them, a future that only existed in your head but still felt real. So choosing yourself feels like cruelty at first, like you're the one causing the pain, but staying was hurting you too. Just slower, just quieter. And that's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes self-respect feels like grief. Sometimes growth feels like loss. Sometimes choosing yourself feels worse than continuing to wait. But guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you cared deeply. And caring deeply doesn't obligate you to keep hurting yourself in silence. After you finally choose yourself, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not peaceful, not freeing, just quiet in a way that's uncomfortable. You're no longer waiting for their message, no longer replaying conversations, no longer building your day around the possibility of them. And at first, that absence hurts more than the waiting did, because unrequited love filled space. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It gave your heart something to hold on to, even if it was hurting you. Though when it's gone, you don't immediately feel relief. You feel loss. You miss the closeness. You miss the routine. You even miss the hope, as painful as it was. And that makes you question your decision. You wonder if you left too early, if you should have tried harder, if loneliness is worse than longing. But this part matters, because this emptiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. Your heart is unlearning a pattern, and unlearning always feels uncomfortable before it feels right. You didn't lose love, you made room for it, even if nothing has filled that space yet. One day after the emptiness settles, something shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. You start noticing how much lighter you feel without carrying love alone. You realize how much energy you used to spend hoping, waiting, adjusting, shrinking, all for someone who never met you where you stood. And for the first time, you don't miss them. You miss the idea of being chosen. That's an important difference, because now you know what it feels like to give deeply, and you also know what it costs when nothing comes back. So when love shows up again one day, it feels different. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to love in silence. It meets you halfway. You don't have to hide how much you care. You don't have to settle for almost. You don't have to convince yourself that crumbs are enough. And that's when you understand something fully. Unrequited love wasn't wasted. It taught you the depth of your heart. It proved you're capable of loving purely, selflessly, fully. But it was never meant to be your ending, because love isn't meant to be endured alone. It's meant to be shared. And one day, someone will choose you as openly as you choose them. No silence, no guessing, no imbalance, just love. Shouldn't have texted her again. I knew at the moment I hit send. That feeling like you already know how it's gonna go, but you do it anyway. Not because you're confused, but because a part of you is still hoping it'll be different this time. So I sent it, simple message, nothing crazy, but deep down, it wasn't just a text, it was me giving the situation one more chance. And I already knew how that usually ends. At first I told myself it was harmless, just a message, just checking in, just seeing what would happen. But it wasn't just that, because when you text someone like that, after everything that already happened, you're not just reaching out, you're reopening something you already struggled to close. And I knew that, but I still did it, because there's always that small voice in your head that says, maybe this time it'll be different. The worst part is waiting after you send it, watching your phone, checking if they read it, trying to act like you don't care, when you clearly do. Because now it's not just about the message anymore, it's about what their response will tell you. Do they still care? Do they ignore you? Do they respond like nothing happened? And no matter what happens, it never feels how you hoped it would. When she replied, it didn't feel the same, not even close. The energy was different, shorter, colder, like I was someone from her past, not someone she still had a connection with. And that's when it hit me. I didn't just text her again. I reminded myself why it ended, because sometimes you don't need closure. You already had it. You just didn't accept it the first time, so you go back, not to fix anything, but to feel something again, even if that feeling ends up hurting you. And that's exactly what happened. That one message brought everything back. The memories, the feelings, the version of her I thought I still had, just to show me that version doesn't exist anymore. For a second, I felt like I reset my progress. Like all the distance I created, all the clarity I built, got undone by one text. And that's frustrating because you know better. But feelings don't always follow what you know. But after sitting with it, I realized something. That message didn't set me back. It confirmed everything I was trying to accept. It showed me clearly there's nothing left there. Not in the way I wanted, and sometimes you need that. Not because you didn't already know, but because seeing it one more time makes it real in a different way. It removes the what if, it removes the doubt, it replaces hope with clarity. So yeah, I shouldn't have texted her again, but I'm not mad that I did, because now I don't wonder anymore. Now I don't think maybe it could have been different. I saw it, I felt it, and I understand it. Some things don't need another chance. They already showed you everything the first time, and next time I won't send that message because I won't need to. Introvert in the relationship means loving someone who lives louder than you do. They talk easily, they fill rooms, they connect fast, and you listen, you observe. You need quiet to recharge after loving hard. Sometimes it feels like you're standing next to someone who shines effortlessly while you glow quietly. They want to go out, you want to stay in, they gain energy from people, you lose it even when you're happy. And the hardest part is not the difference. It's wondering if your quiet way of loving is enough. Because you don't always say everything, you don't always show excitement loudly, but when you choose someone, you choose them deeply. Being the introvert doesn't mean you love less. It means you love in a way that's calm, steady, and intentional, and sometimes that gets misunderstood. Being with an extrovert means watching them move through the world with ease. They make friends everywhere, they're invited everywhere, people are drawn to them naturally, and sometimes, standing next to that, you wonder where you fit, not because they make you feel small, but because you don't take up space the same way. They thrive in crowds. You count the minutes until you can recharge. They talk things out loud. You process everything internally first, and there are moments where you feel guilty for needing quiet after a long day of loving them. You worry that asking for space sounds like distance, that needing alone time sounds like disinterest, but the truth is, your silence isn't absence. It's how you stay present without burning out. Loving loudly isn't the only way to love deeply, and being quieter doesn't mean you're less committed. It just means your love lives in steadiness, not spotlight. The unspoken fear is that one day you won't be enough, that they'll want more noise, more people, more energy than you can give. You worry they'll mistake your calm for boredom, your need for quiet for distance. You love them deeply but not loudly, and sometimes you wonder if that difference will matter too much. You don't compete for attention, you don't need constant stimulation, you just want connection that feels safe and real. The fear isn't that they'll leave, it's that they'll outgrow you without realizing you were loving them in the only way that feels honest to you. But loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means choosing them without the performance. It means staying without needing the room to notice. The right partner won't need you to be louder, they'll need you to be you. Introverts love deeply in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember details, you notice shifts in mood, you feel things before they're said. While they're talking to the room, you're paying attention to them. You're the one who listens after the party ends, the one who creates calm when everything feels loud, the one who offers presence instead of constant stimulation. Your love shows up in consistency, not volume, in choosing the same person again and again, even when it's quiet, even when no one's watching. And often your extroverted partner doesn't realize how much they need that until life gets overwhelming, until they're tired, until the noise fades, until they need someone who knows how to stay still with them. That's when your kind of love becomes the anchor. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Introverts and extroverts can work beautifully together, but only when both ways of loving are respected. You don't need to become louder to be enough for them, and they don't need to become quieter to be right for you. What matters is understanding that your need for space isn't rejection, that their need for people isn't avoidance. You recharge differently, but you can still meet in the middle. When an extrovert learns that quiet isn't distance, and an introvert learns that excitement isn't chaos, something soft happens. You stop trying to fix each other, you start protecting each other, you give them grounding, they give you expansion, and suddenly The difference that once felt like a risk becomes the balance that makes the relationship work. Asking for space doesn't mean you love them less. It means you know yourself. Introverts don't pull away to create distance. They pull away to come back whole. But asking for that space can feel heavy. You worry it sounds like rejection. You worry they'll take it personally. You worry needing time alone makes you difficult to love. The right partner won't hear, "I need space," as "I don't want you." They'll hear it as, "I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better." You don't need to apologize for how you recharge. You don't need to explain it every time. Love doesn't require constant closeness to be real. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is step back for a moment, not to disconnect, but to return as yourself. Introverts show love in quiet, steady ways. You remember the little things they forget they mentioned. You notice when their mood shifts before they say anything. You check in without being asked. Your love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's making space for them after a long day. It's choosing them in calm moments, not just exciting ones. It's staying present when things slow down. Sometimes you wish they could see it more clearly. Not because you need praise, but because your love doesn't always announce itself. But the right partner will feel it. They'll feel it in how safe they are with you, and how calm things get around you, and how you stay, even when nothing exciting is happening. Quiet love isn't invisible. It's just not performing, and the people who value depth will always recognize it. It's easy to compare yourself to an extroverted partner, to wonder why you don't light up rooms, why you don't want constant plans, why loving quietly feels like a disadvantage. But your quiet nature isn't something to fix, it's something that brings balance. You offer depth in a world of noise, you offer presence in a world of distraction, you offer steadiness when everything else feels fast. You don't compete for attention, you create connection, and when you stop comparing, something shifts. You stop shrinking next to their energy. You stop questioning your value. You stop feeling like you need to match them to be worthy of love. You realize your calm isn't less than their excitement. It's what gives the relationship somewhere to rest. And the right partner won't ask you to be louder. They'll thank you for being grounding. One of the quiet fears is being replaced by louder energy, by someone more outgoing, more exciting, more effortless in social spaces. You worry that your calm won't be enough forever. But the truth is, people don't stay for volume. They stay for how they feel when everything slows down. An extroverted partner may enjoy attention, but they rest in safety. They recharge in understanding. They stay where they feel accepted without having to perform, and that's where you shine. You offer a place where they don't have to impress anyone, where they can be tired, where they can be real. Loud energy is easy to find, steady presence is not, and the partner who truly values you won't look for replacement. They'll recognize that your quiet way of loving is exactly what makes the relationship feel secure. Being the introvert was never a disadvantage. It just doesn't announce itself. Your love lasts because it isn't fueled by excitement alone. It's built on presence, on listening, on staying when things are quiet and ordinary. You don't love for the room, you love for the person. And that kind of love doesn't fade when the noise does. The right partner won't ask you to be louder, faster, or different. They'll appreciate that with you. Love feels steady instead of overwhelming, safe instead of performative. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature made you harder to love, it didn't. It made you the place someone can finally rest. And that's not less, that's rare. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving halfway. It means you choose depth over display. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most meaningful presence in someone's life. The right partner won't measure love by energy levels. They'll feel it in consistency, in safety, in how calm it feels to be with you. And one day you'll realize something simple. Your quiet wasn't something they had to tolerate. It was the reason they felt at home. I don't think love works anymore. Not the way it used to. Not the way we were told it would. Because everything about it feels fragile now. Disposable. Temporary. I used to believe love was something you built and protected. Something you chose every day. Something that got stronger the more you worked through it. Now it feels like something people try on. Like an outfit. Like a phase. Like something that lasts until it becomes inconvenient. And maybe that's just my experience talking. Maybe I'm jaded, maybe I'm tired. But it's hard not to feel this way when you've watched effort get ignored, loyalty get tested, and consistency get replaced with excitement. It feels like the people who care the most lose the fastest. The ones who communicate openly get labeled too much. The ones who stay calm get called boring. The ones who try to build something stable get overlooked for something unpredictable. And I don't understand when stability became unattractive. When did peace start feeling dull? When did consistency start feeling optional? When did love turn into a competition of who cares less? Because that's what it feels like now. Who replies slower? Who shows less emotion? Who keeps more options open? Who can detach quicker? It feels like the winner in modern love is the one who invests the least, and that doesn't make sense to me. Because love was never supposed to be strategic, it was supposed to be mutual, it was supposed to feel safe, it was supposed to feel intentional. But now, it feels like leverage, it feels like power dynamics, it feels like emotional poker, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't affect me. I don't want to play games, I don't want to pretend I don't care just to protect myself, I don't want to withhold affection just to maintain mystery. But every time I show up genuinely, it feels like I lose, and after enough losses, you start questioning the system, not yourself, the system, because if doing things the right way keeps ending the wrong way, you start wondering if the rules changed, and maybe they did. Social media makes everyone feel replaceable. Dating apps make options endless, attention is constant, validation is everywhere, so commitment feels outdated. Why work through something uncomfortable when you can scroll into something new? Why communicate through confusion when you can ghost and reset? Why fix when you can replace? And I hate that mindset, but I see it everywhere. And after a while, it makes you wonder if love is even designed to last in this environment. If loyalty is rare, if depth is rare, if patience is rare. And when something is rare, it's harder to find. And when it's harder to find, you start feeling like maybe it doesn't work anymore. Not because love isn't real, but because people aren't built to sustain it. And that's the scariest thought, because I don't want to become cold. I don't want to stop believing, but I'm tired of investing in something that feels unstable. I'm tired of building just to watch it collapse. I'm tired of thinking something is solid just to realize it was temporary. And maybe love still works. Maybe it's just harder to find. Maybe it requires more maturity than most people are willing to bring. But right now, it feels broken. Not love itself, but the way we handle it. And I don't know if that's pessimism talking or experience. I think what makes me say, I don't think love works anymore isn't bitterness, it's exhaustion. Because every time I try to approach it the right way, intentional, honest, consistent, it feels like I'm bringing depth into a space that rewards detachment. And after a while, you start feeling like you're built wrong for this era. Like maybe you care too much. Like maybe you expect too much. Like maybe you still believe in something that everyone else quietly downgraded. It feels like effort used to mean something. Now effort feels risky. Because the more you give, the more exposed you are. And exposure in modern dating feels dangerous. The one who opens up first is vulnerable. The one who commits first is replaceable. The one who expresses feelings first is too invested. So people hold back, they ration affection, they ration honesty, they ration effort, and when both people are rationing, nothing fully forms. It becomes this half-built connection where nobody is fully in, just partially attached and partially guarded. And that's where love starts to feel like it doesn't work, because love requires surrender, not recklessness. Not obsession, but surrender. You have to be willing to be seen, willing to risk loss, willing to invest without guaranteed return. And nobody wants to do that anymore. Everyone wants certainty before commitment, proof before vulnerability, security before effort. But that's not how love works. Love is built in uncertainty. It's built in risk. It's built in choosing someone without knowing the full outcome. And we live in a time where uncertainty feels intolerable. We want options. We want backups. We want insurance. So instead of building depth with one person, we keep one foot out the door just in case. And you can't build something real with 1 foot already outside. That's why it feels broken. Not because love itself stopped working, but because we approach it defensively now. And I get it. People have been hurt. People have been betrayed. People have been replaced, so they protect themselves. But protection can slowly turn into detachment, and detachment kills depth. You can't love deeply if you're constantly calculating exits. You can't bond securely if you're scanning for upgrades. You can't build trust if you're always half preparing for collapse. And I'm tired of feeling like I have to adapt to that. I don't want to love strategically. I don't want to care less just to stay safe. I don't want to pretend I don't feel strongly just to avoid looking invested. But when you keep getting hurt for showing up fully, you start wondering if maybe the world rewards the opposite. And that's where the doubt creeps in. Maybe love doesn't work anymore because too many people are operating from fear instead of intention. Too many people want the feeling of love without the responsibility of it. They want butterflies but not boundaries, excitement but not effort, chemistry but not consistency, and chemistry fades without consistency. Excitement fades without stability. Butterflies disappear when there's no structure holding them, so relationships collapse. And instead of reflecting, people reset, and the cycle continues. And when you've seen that cycle enough times, it's hard not to feel like something fundamental shifted. Like the culture around love changed. Like commitment feels heavier now. Like loyalty feels optional. Like patience feels outdated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are still people who believe in depth. Maybe there are still people who value stability. Maybe there are still people who don't treat connection like it's disposable. But when your personal experiences keep showing the opposite, it's hard to stay optimistic. It's hard to believe love works when everything around it feels temporary. And I don't want to lose faith, but I also don't want to keep pretending it's easy, because it's not anymore. And maybe love still works, but maybe it only works when two people are equally ready to stop playing defense, and that combination feels rare, not impossible, just rare. And rare takes patience, and patience feels hard when you've already invested so much of it before. So yeah, right now it feels broken. But maybe what's broken isn't love. Maybe it's how we've learned to approach it, and that might be fixable, but only if both people are willing to actually build instead of constantly preparing to leave. Maybe the real reason I don't think love works anymore is because it feels like timing is always off. You meet someone who seems aligned, you connect, you talk for hours, you feel understood, and then something small shifts. Not dramatic, not explosive, just subtle. They pull back slightly, energy changes, consistency drops, and instead of addressing it directly, things fade. That's what modern love feels like. Not endings, fading, no real closure, no real confrontation, just gradual detachment, and it leaves you questioning everything. Did I imagine the connection? Did I misread the depth? Did they ever feel it the way I did? Because when something ends without clarity, your mind fills in the blanks, and most of the time the blanks aren't kind. You start blaming yourself. Maybe I was too much, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe I moved too fast, maybe I didn't move fast enough, and that mental spiral gets exhausting. Love starts feeling like a puzzle with missing pieces. Like no matter how carefully you approach it, something unpredictable shifts. And maybe that unpredictability is what makes it feel broken, because love requires stability to grow. You can't build something meaningful on inconsistent ground. You can't plant something deep in unstable soil. And right now, everything feels unstable. People are distracted. Attention spans are shorter. Validation is constant. It's hard to compete with instant dopamine, because love isn't instant dopamine. It's slow burn. It's repetition. It's routine. It's choosing someone again and again, even when the excitement settles. And we live in a culture that constantly chases the next high. So once comfort replaces adrenaline, people confuse it with boredom. Once peace replaces intensity, people think something's missing. But peace isn't missing something. Peace is the goal. And maybe that's why love feels like it doesn't work anymore. Because people are chasing sparks instead of substance. They want fireworks every day, but fireworks aren't sustainable. They're loud, they're bright, they're temporary. Real love isn't fireworks, it's foundation, and foundations aren't flashy. They're steady, and steady doesn't trend well. Steady doesn't go viral, steady doesn't give you constant emotional spikes, but steady is what lasts. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've confused intensity with compatibility. Maybe we've confused excitement with alignment. Maybe we've confused attention with affection. And when those illusions fade, people assume love failed, but maybe love didn't fail, maybe expectations did. Still, it's hard not to feel tired, because every time you start believing in something new, you're also bracing for impact. You don't enter connections open anymore. You enter them cautiously, guarded, prepared, and that guarded energy changes everything, because love thrives in openness, and guarded hearts can't fully attach. So it becomes this cycle. People get hurt, they protect themselves, they enter something new with walls up. The connection never fully forms, it collapses. They say, see, love doesn't work. But maybe the walls are the problem. Maybe we're all trying to avoid pain so aggressively that we're also avoiding depth. And I don't know how to fix that, because I understand why people guard themselves. I do it too. After enough disappointment, you start building armor, but armor blocks connection just as much as it blocks harm. And that's the dilemma. How do you stay open in a world that keeps showing you how easy it is to be replaced? How do you trust when you've seen how quickly people move on? How do you believe in permanence when everything feels temporary? Those questions don't have easy answers. And that's why sometimes it feels easier to just say, love doesn't work anymore. Because admitting it feels broken, feels safer than admitting you're still hoping it does. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe I don't actually think love is broken. Maybe I'm just scared that I won't find someone who approaches it the way I do. Someone who values depth over dopamine, stability over sparks, consistency over chaos. Because if that kind of person still exists, then maybe love still works. It's just rare. And rare feels invisible when you've only experienced the opposite. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe the way we approach it is. And maybe the real challenge isn't finding love. It's finding someone who isn't playing defense the whole time, because love can't work if both people are preparing for it to fail. It only works when both decide to build, not brace, and that's what I'm still trying to believe. I think what really makes me say love doesn't work anymore is how disposable everything feels. Nothing feels permanent. Not feelings, not promises, not even history. You can spend months building something with someone. Routines, memories, habits, inside jokes, and then one day it's like it never happened. They move on, they reset, they rebrand their life without you in it, and you're left sitting there wondering how something that felt so real could be treated so lightly. It makes you question whether permanence even exists anymore. Because love used to mean endurance. It used to mean working through discomfort. It used to mean fighting for connection when things got complicated. Now it feels like the moment things feel heavy, people exit. The moment conflict shows up, people reconsider. The moment effort is required consistently, people get tired, and I'm not saying everyone is like that. But it's common enough that it starts to feel normal, and when something unhealthy becomes normalized, you start adjusting your expectations, you start lowering standards without even realizing it. You start telling yourself, maybe this is just how it is now, maybe I'm expecting too much, maybe stability is unrealistic. And that's the dangerous part, because once you start believing depth is unrealistic, you start accepting less than you deserve. You start settling for half effort, half commitment, half presence, and half love never feels secure. It feels temporary. It feels like you're constantly on probation. Like you have to maintain value instead of simply being valued, and that's exhausting. Love shouldn't feel like an audition. It shouldn't feel like you're being evaluated weekly. It shouldn't feel like you're one mistake away from being replaced, but that's what modern dating culture does. It keeps everyone slightly disposable because there's always another option, and options change the psychology of commitment. Now, when people feel like there's endless supply, they don't invest deeply. They sample, they test, they compare, they upgrade, and depth requires focus. can't build something meaningful if you're constantly scanning the horizon. And I'm tired of feeling like depth is rare, like loyalty is rare, like emotional maturity is rare. Because if those things are rare, then sustainable love becomes rare too. And when something becomes rare, it starts feeling mythical, like a concept instead of a reality. And I don't want love to feel mythical. I want it to feel grounded, attainable, real. But it's hard to believe in that when everything around you looks temporary. It's hard to stay optimistic when you've watched people replace long-term connections in weeks, when you've seen loyalty get overlooked for excitement, when you've seen communication get labeled as too intense. It makes you question if the qualities you value are even appreciated anymore. And I refuse to become colder just to survive in this environment, but sometimes I understand why people do. Because caring fully feels risky, showing up fully feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe when you've seen how quickly people pivot. So instead of opening fully, people guard. Instead of committing deeply, people hesitate. Instead of building, people browse. And browsing never creates attachment, it creates distraction. So maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore, because too many people are browsing instead of building. Too many people are entertaining instead of committing. Too many people are protecting themselves instead of participating fully. And when both people are slightly guarded, slightly detached, slightly prepared to leave, the connection never roots deeply, it stays surface level. And surface level love doesn't survive pressure, it collapses the moment something real tests it. And that collapse reinforces the belief, see, love doesn't work. But maybe love isn't failing, maybe it's just not being handled properly. Maybe it requires two people who are equally tired of games, equally tired of ego, equally ready to stop scanning and start building. And that combination is rare, not impossible, just rare. And when something is rare, it takes time to find. But when you've already waited, already invested, already tried, it's hard not to feel discouraged. It's hard not to say, maybe this just doesn't work anymore. Because hope feels heavy when you've carried it through disappointment repeatedly. Still, there's a small part of me that refuses to fully give up, not because I haven't been hurt, but because I know what depth feels like, and I know I'm capable of giving it. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe it just feels misaligned. Maybe I haven't met someone operating at the same level yet, and maybe love only doesn't work when one person is building and the other is browsing. And next time I won't settle for someone who's just browsing, because I'm done treating love like something experimental. I want something intentional, and if that's rare, then I'll wait, but I won't pretend that what's common right now feels functional, because it doesn't, and that's why sometimes it feels broken. Another reason I feel like love doesn't work anymore is because nobody seems patient enough for it. Real love is repetitive. It's waking up and choosing the same person on regular days, not just exciting ones. It's having conversations that aren't aesthetic. It's working through misunderstandings. It's sitting in awkward silence sometimes. It's resolving conflict instead of avoiding it. And patience feels rare now. The moment something feels complicated, people start questioning compatibility instead of questioning their communication. The moment effort feels required, people start asking if there's someone easier. The moment discomfort shows up, people confuse it with wrong person. But discomfort isn't always misalignment. Sometimes it's growth, sometimes it's two different perspectives trying to learn each other. And learning takes time, but time feels expensive in a world where attention is cheap. It's easier to restart with someone new than it is to repair with someone familiar. It's easier to chase a fresh high than maintain steady connection. It's easier to scroll than sit, and when everything around you reinforces immediacy, patience feels outdated. But love has never been immediate. It starts fast sometimes, and sure, but it sustains slowly. And sustainability isn't exciting, it's disciplined, it's structured, it's built. And I think a lot of people want the feeling of falling in love, but not the responsibility of staying in love. Falling is automatic, staying is intentional, falling feels magical, staying feels deliberate, and deliberate takes effort, and effort feels optional now. That's what makes it feel broken. Because if two people aren't equally patient, equally committed to working through friction, the relationship never stabilizes. It stays fragile, and fragile things shatter easily. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it didn't work because it was never given time to become strong. You can't plant something and expect it to grow overnight, but people expect emotional security immediately. They expect certainty quickly. They expect perfection early. And when reality shows flaws, they exit instead of adjusting. And after experiencing that enough times, you start questioning whether anyone actually stays long enough to build something durable. It's exhausting to be the only one willing to sit in discomfort and talk it through. It's exhausting to be the only one committed to fixing instead of fleeing. It's exhausting to feel like you're building while the other person is evaluating, and evaluation kills intimacy. Because if someone is constantly assessing whether you're worth it, they're never fully in. They're half invested, half prepared to leave. And love doesn't grow in half investment, it grows in commitment. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe commitment does, maybe patience does, maybe resilience does, because real love requires all three, and without them it collapses under the weight of normal human imperfection, and humans are imperfect, always, which means love will always require forgiveness, always require communication, always require choosing someone even when it's not convenient, and if people aren't willing to do that consistently, then yeah, it starts to feel like love doesn't work anymore because nobody is sustaining it long enough to see it mature. And maturity is where love actually becomes powerful, not in the butterflies, not in the early intensity, but in the stability that comes after. And maybe we're just living in a time that glorifies the beginning but undervalues the maintenance, and maintenance isn't sexy, but it's essential. And I'm not ready to say love is dead, but I am ready to admit that patience feels endangered, and without patience, nothing lasting survives. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because nobody trusts it. Not fully, not without hesitation. Everyone says they want something real, but when something real starts forming, fear shows up faster than commitment. Fear of being replaced, fear of being cheated on, fear of being the one who cares more, fear of looking stupid. So instead of leaning in, people brace. They stay slightly detached. They keep backup options emotionally. They don't say everything they feel. They don't invest fully. And when two people are both protecting themselves at the same time, nothing deep ever roots. It becomes this cautious connection where both are waiting for the other to prove something first. Show me you won't leave. Show me you're serious. Show me I'm safe. But safety doesn't come from interrogation. It comes from participation. And participation requires risk. That's the part that feels lost now. Nobody wants to risk looking foolish for love, but love has always required that. You have to be willing to look foolish, to say I care first, to show up consistently even when you don't know the outcome, to invest without a guarantee, and guarantees don't exist. So instead of risking vulnerability, people risk nothing. They test, they observe, they calculate, they delay emotional investment until it feels secure. But emotional security doesn't grow from calculation. It grows from consistency, and consistency requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. It's a cycle, and when one part is missing, the whole structure collapses. So maybe love feels broken because too many people are trying to feel safe before they've actually built anything safe. They want certainty before commitment, but certainty is something you earn together, not something you demand up front. And I get it. Nobody wants to be hurt again. Nobody wants to feel like the fool who cared more. Nobody wants to invest months just to be replaced in weeks. But if both people are guarding themselves at all times, love never gets a chance to breathe. It suffocates under suspicion, it weakens under ego, it dissolves under comparison, and comparison is everywhere now. We compare partners to people online, we compare relationships to curated timelines, we compare our connection to someone else's highlight reel, and comparison erodes gratitude. It makes you focus on what's missing instead of what's present, and when gratitude fades, dissatisfaction grows, and dissatisfaction looks for alternatives, and alternatives are always available now, so commitment feels heavier than ever, because staying means choosing one thing in a world full of options, and that feels scary to people who haven't learned how to be content. And that's another part of why it feels like love doesn't work, because contentment is rare, and without contentment nothing feels enough. Not the effort, not the loyalty, not the stability. There's always a what if, and what if is poison to commitment. What if there's someone better? What if I'm settling? What if this isn't the highest version of love? But love isn't about maximizing, it's about choosing. And choice requires focus, and focus requires discipline. And discipline isn't romanticized anymore. Excitement is, intensity is, instant chemistry is. But chemistry alone can't sustain anything. It ignites, it doesn't stabilize, and maybe that's why love feels like it fails. Because people confuse ignition with foundation. They fall fast, they burn bright, they collapse quickly. And then they say, see? Love doesn't work. But maybe what didn't work was patience. Maybe what didn't work was emotional maturity. Maybe what didn't work was two people being equally willing to commit without constantly scanning for something better. I don't think love stopped working. I think standards changed. I think attention got divided. I think ego got louder. And I think fear got stronger. And fear makes people protect themselves in ways that sabotage the very thing they want. So when I say I don't think love works anymore, maybe what I really mean is I don't see enough people willing to handle it properly, because love is simple. People complicate it. Love is consistent. People are inconsistent. Love is intentional. People are distracted. And until two people show up ready to be disciplined about connection, not just excited about it, it's going to keep feeling unstable. And that's exhausting, because I don't want to approach love like a risk assessment. I want to approach it like a build. But building requires two architects, not one builder and one evaluator. And maybe that's the real challenge, not finding love, but finding someone who isn't quietly preparing for it to fail. Because love only doesn't work when someone stops working at it. And too many people stop the moment it requires effort instead of adrenaline. And I'm tired of adrenaline. I want foundation. And until I find someone who wants foundation too, yeah, it's gonna feel broken. Another reason it feels like love doesn't work anymore is because people are addicted to potential more than presence. They fall in love with what something could be instead of what it actually is. They fall for the idea, the fantasy, the imagined future. But when reality sets in, flaws, habits, differences, instead of adjusting expectations, they downgrade the connection. It's like people want perfection in a human body, and humans aren't perfect. So the moment imperfection shows up, doubt follows. She could be better. He could be more. This might not be the best I can get. And that mindset destroys contentment, because if you're always wondering if something better exists, you'll never water what's in front of you. You'll keep browsing instead of building. And browsing doesn't create depth, it creates comparison, and comparison slowly poisons appreciation. You stop seeing what someone does for you. You focus on what they don't. You stop valuing consistency. You crave excitement, and excitement is unstable. Love isn't built on constant excitement. It's built on reliability, and reliability feels boring if you're addicted to adrenaline. That's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want peace, they want chaos that feels passionate. They want intensity that feels cinematic. They want love to look like a movie, dramatic, emotional, unpredictable, but real love is structured. it's routine, it's sometimes quiet, and quiet doesn't trend, quiet doesn't feel thrilling, but quiet is secure. And security is rare in a world that rewards unpredictability. So when someone gives you stability, it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortable gets labeled as not right, so they leave, and then they chase something that feels intense again, and that cycle repeats, and every time it collapses, they say, love just doesn't work for me. But maybe it's not love that's failing, maybe it's expectations, maybe it's the craving for perfection, maybe it's the refusal to accept that long-term connection requires compromise and discipline, because compromise doesn't mean settling, it means adjusting, it means understanding that no person will check every box, it means valuing depth over dopamine. And dopamine fades, depth stays, but depth requires maturity. And maturity isn't loud, it's subtle, it's calm, it's secure enough to not constantly question whether something better exists. And that kind of security feels rare right now. It feels like people want love to feel good every second, but no connection feels good every second. There are misunderstandings, bad days, moments of frustration, and if someone expects constant emotional highs, they'll leave the moment it feels neutral. And neutral isn't bad. Neutral is stable, but stability doesn't give you butterflies, it gives you peace, and peace feels unfamiliar in a culture addicted to stimulation. So yeah, sometimes it feels like love doesn't work anymore because people don't recognize it. When it's calm, they mistake chaos for chemistry. They mistake unpredictability for passion, they mistake anxiety for attraction, and healthy love doesn't feel anxious, it feels steady. But if someone's nervous system is used to chaos, steady feels boring, and boring feels wrong, so they leave something stable for something intense. And intensity fades, and the cycle repeats, and that repetition creates the illusion that love is broken. But maybe what's broken is the way people define it. Maybe love hasn't changed, maybe we have, maybe we expect too much fantasy and not enough responsibility. Maybe we want effortless depth, but depth is never effortless. It's built, maintained, protected, and protection requires discipline, and discipline isn't romanticized anymore. But without it, nothing lasts. Well, maybe love still works, but only for people who understand that it's not supposed to feel like fireworks forever. It's supposed to feel like foundation, and foundation doesn't crumble at the first sign of imperfection. It strengthens when both people decide to reinforce it. And that's the part that feels rare, not love, but two people equally ready to treat it like something sacred instead of something optional. And until that alignment happens, yeah, it's gonna keep feeling broken. And sometimes I wonder if the reason love feels broken is because people are more afraid of vulnerability than they are of loneliness. Loneliness is uncomfortable, but vulnerability feels dangerous. Loneliness just feels empty. Vulnerability feels exposing. And exposing yourself in a world where people can replace you in days feels reckless. So instead of risking being fully seen, people present edited versions of themselves, curated personalities, controlled emotions, measured effort. And when two curated versions try to connect, the connection stays surface level, because depth only forms when masks come off. And masks are safer. Masks protect ego. Masks protect pride. Masks protect image, but masks also block intimacy, and intimacy is what makes love feel alive. Without intimacy, you're just sharing space, and shared space isn't the same as shared depth. Maybe love feels broken because nobody wants to be the first one to remove the armor. Nobody wants to be the one who says, I care, without knowing if it'll be reciprocated. Nobody wants to look foolish, but love has always required risk, and if risk tolerance is low, depth tolerance is low too, and low depth means fragile connection, and fragile connection collapses under normal human imperfection. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it never had the chance to, because it was protected too heavily. You can't build something strong if both people are guarding themselves more than they're investing. And that guarding energy feels everywhere now. It feels like people are in relationships half committed, half prepared to exit, always scanning, always evaluating, always calculating. And calculation kills spontaneity. It kills surrender. It kills the soft parts of love, because soft parts require trust, and trust requires time, and time requires patience, and patience feels scarce. So people rush into feelings but hesitate into commitment. They want intensity without obligation, connection without responsibility, attention without accountability. And that imbalance makes everything unstable, because love isn't just emotion. It's discipline, it's consistency when things feel normal, it's showing up when excitement fades, and showing up isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've glamorized beginnings and neglected maintenance. Maybe we've romanticized sparks and ignored structure. And when structure isn't present, collapse feels inevitable. So love starts to feel broken. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it isn't being handled with care, and care requires emotional maturity, and emotional maturity isn't common, it's developed, and development requires self-awareness, and self-awareness requires reflection, and reflection requires sitting with discomfort, and a lot of people avoid discomfort at all costs. So instead of reflecting, they replace. Instead of adjusting, they exit. Instead of building, they restart, and restarting feels easier than repairing. But restarting resets the lesson too, and the cycle continues. And after watching enough cycles, it's hard not to feel like love is just temporary. Like everything eventually fades, like no one really stays. But maybe the problem isn't love, maybe it's our attention spans, maybe it's our tolerance for imperfection, maybe it's our fear of being fully seen. And maybe love only works when two people are brave enough to risk looking foolish for it, brave enough to commit without constant comparison, brave enough to stay when it's not cinematic, brave enough to build when it's not exciting. And that kind of bravery feels rare, but rare doesn't mean non-existent, it just means selective. And maybe the reason love feels broken to me is because I've seen too much avoidance and not enough bravery. But that doesn't mean bravery doesn't exist. It just means I haven't experienced it consistently yet. And that's frustrating, but frustration doesn't equal impossibility. It just means the standard is high, and high standards take time to align with. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe it's just misused. And until two people approach it with equal discipline and equal depth, it's going to keep feeling unstable. But I still believe, even if it's quiet belief now, that real love requires courage. And courage isn't loud, it's consistent. And when I find someone consistent enough to stay through discomfort instead of running from it, maybe it won't feel broken anymore. Maybe it'll finally feel built. There's another truth I don't always say out loud. Sometimes when I say I don't think love works anymore, what I really mean is I'm scared to believe in it again. Because believing in it requires hope, and hope is heavy when you've watched things fall apart more than once. It's easier to say love is broken than to admit you're afraid of being hurt again. It's easier to act detached than to admit you still want something real. It's easier to lower expectations than to risk disappointment. But the reason it still frustrates me so much is because I do believe in depth, I believe in loyalty, I believe in consistency, I believe in choosing someone and actually staying. So when I look around and see temporary everywhere, it feels like I'm out of place, like I'm built for something that isn't common anymore, and that can make you feel isolated. Because you start wondering if you're unrealistic, if you expect too much, if maybe you're the one who needs to adapt. But adapting to a culture that treats connection lightly feels like losing something essential, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to become someone who keeps emotional backups. I don't want to become someone who leaves leaves at the first sign of discomfort, but when you keep getting hurt for caring deeply, you start questioning if depth is sustainable. You start questioning if maybe emotional availability is a liability, and that's where it starts to feel broken, because when emotional maturity feels like a disadvantage, something is misaligned. If being honest gets you labeled as too intense, if being consistent gets you labeled as too predictable, if being loyal gets you taken for granted, then it feels like the traits that build love aren't valued anymore, and that's exhausting. Because I don't want to play a game where detachment wins. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to maintain power. I don't want to approach relationships strategically. I want to approach them intentionally. And intentional love requires two people who are equally committed to depth, not one person building and one person browsing, not one person healing and one person distracting, not one person fighting and one person evaluating, two people building together. And maybe that's why it feels broken, because alignment like that feels rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because it requires both people to be self-aware enough to recognize what they're building. And self-awareness takes work, and not everyone does the work. But here's something I'm slowly realizing. Just because I haven't experienced that alignment consistently doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found someone operating at the same emotional frequency yet. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people who are still figuring themselves out, still healing, still exploring, still distracted, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if two people aren't equally ready, love will always feel unstable. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe timing is, maybe readiness is, maybe emotional maturity is, and that's a different problem than love itself. Because love, real love, still requires the same ingredients it always has: trust, patience, consistency, effort, communication, choice. Those haven't changed. What's changed is how many people are willing to commit to them long term. And that's what makes it feel fragile, but fragile doesn't mean impossible. It just means selective. And maybe the reason it feels broken is because I haven't experienced the selectivity paying off yet. So do I really think love doesn't work anymore? Or am I just tired? Tired of building with people who weren't ready? Tired of investing in connections that weren't aligned? Tired of watching things collapse because one person stopped trying? Maybe what feels broken isn't love. Maybe it's my optimism. Maybe it's my patience. Maybe it's my energy. Because loving deeply takes energy. Believing in something lasting takes courage. And after enough disappointment, courage feels heavy. But here's what I know. I don't want temporary. I don't want half effort. I don't want something that collapses the moment it feels normal. I want stability. I want intentionality. I want someone who doesn't get bored when peace replaces intensity. And if that's rare, then I'll accept that it's rare. But I won't accept that it's impossible because I know I exist. And if I exist, someone who still believes in depth and loyalty and consistency, then that means other people like that exist too. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works because it's not common anymore, but uncommon doesn't mean extinct. It just means it requires discernment. It requires patience. It requires walking away from people who treat connection casually. And maybe that's the real shift. Maybe love doesn't work when we try to force it with the wrong people. Maybe it only works when both people are equally disciplined about it. And discipline isn't flashy, but it's powerful. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it's just rare enough that you have to be selective about who you build it with. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I refuse to become cold just because it's hard. I refuse to downgrade my depth just because others operate shallow. And one day, when two people who both believe in building, not browsing, meet each other, love won't feel broken. It'll feel intentional. And intentional love, that still works. There's a point where saying love doesn't work anymore becomes less about love and more about self-protection. Because if I convince myself it's broken, then I don't have to risk it again. If I label it dysfunctional, I don't have to open up. If I tell myself everyone leaves, then no one can surprise me when they do. It becomes armor. And armor feels safer than hope. Hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires believing someone will show up differently than the last person did. Hope requires trusting that the next connection won't collapse the same way the others did. And that's hard, because patterns create expectations. If you've seen inconsistency enough times, you start expecting it. If you've been replaced quickly, you start bracing for it. If you've watched effort go unmatched, you start rationing yours. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop loving the way you used to. You become careful, measured, guarded. You don't say everything you feel. You don't invest as quickly. You don't attach as deeply. And then when something ends, it hurts less, but it also meant less. And that's the trade-off nobody talks about. If you protect yourself enough, you reduce pain, but you also reduce depth. And depth is the whole point, so maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because I've been loving defensively, not fully, not recklessly, but cautiously. And cautious love never fully blooms. It survives. It doesn't flourish. And surviving isn't the same as thriving. Maybe I'm not doubting love. Maybe I'm doubting whether I can afford to feel that deeply again. Because feeling deeply means risking loss deeply. And loss has weight. And carrying that weight repeatedly makes you tired. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If I stop believing in love because others mishandled it, then I let their behavior reshape my character. And I don't want that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to operate from fear. I don't want to treat every new person like they're already guilty of someone else's mistakes. But healing doesn't happen instantly. Trust doesn't reset overnight. And rebuilding optimism takes time, so maybe love isn't broken. Maybe I'm just rebuilding my trust in it. Maybe what feels like cynicism is actually exhaustion. Maybe what feels like disbelief is actually disappointment that hasn't fully healed, because when I'm honest with myself, I still want depth. I still want consistency. I still want something stable and intentional. If I truly believed love didn't work anymore, I wouldn't still crave it. I wouldn't still think about it. I wouldn't still care this much. The fact that I'm frustrated proves I still believe in it. You don't get frustrated over something you've given up on. You get frustrated over something you still want, but haven't found. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe love isn't broken. Maybe my patience is just being tested. Maybe my standards are filtering out what doesn't align. Maybe every failed connection isn't proof that love doesn't work. Maybe it's proof that misalignment doesn't. And misalignment is common, but alignment is rare. And rare things take time to find. So maybe I need to stop saying love is broken. Maybe I need to say love is selective. Maybe I haven't experienced the right version of it yet. Because the version I want, stable, mutual, disciplined, requires two people equally committed to depth. And depth isn't everywhere. But it exists, I exist, which means someone else like me exists too. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people at different stages of emotional maturity, different levels of readiness, different levels of self-awareness, and that doesn't mean love is dead. It just means timing matters, and readiness matters, and alignment matters. So yeah, some days it feels broken, some days it feels like effort goes nowhere. Some days it feels like loyalty isn't valued, but deep down, I don't think love stopped working. I think I'm just tired of building with people who weren't built to stay. And that's different, because when two people are both ready, not just interested, not just attracted, but ready, love doesn't collapse easily. It stabilizes, it deepens, it roots. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it just requires the right two people at the right time. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I'm not done believing in it. I'm just more careful about who I build it with. And that's growth. Not defeat. Say your second love hits the deepest. And at first I didn't believe that. I thought nothing could touch the intensity of the first one. First love is loud. It's reckless. It's the kind of love that makes you believe everything will work out just because you feel it so strongly. You fall without thinking. You trust without fear. You don't even know what heartbreak really is yet, so you give everything freely. But the second love comes after reality has already introduced itself. It comes after disappointment, after the nights where you questioned your worth, after you learned that love doesn't always stay no matter how hard you try. So this time, you don't rush, you don't dive in head first, you hesitate, you analyze, you protect your heart like it's something fragile because now you know it is. And that's what makes the second love different. You don't love blindly anymore, you love intentionally, you pay attention to effort, to consistency, to how someone treats you when it's inconvenient, not just when it's easy. You're still scared, but you're braver in a quieter way. You open up slowly, piece by piece, hoping you won't regret it again. And somehow, it still means more than you expected, because after being broken once, feeling safe again hits different. Feeling chosen without having to beg hits different. Being loved without chaos feels almost unfamiliar at first. You keep waiting for the catch. For the moment it all falls apart, but it doesn't, at least not right away. The second love isn't about butterflies in your stomach. It's about calm in your chest. It's about being understood without having to explain yourself over and over. It's about not feeling anxious when your phone is quiet. It's about knowing where you stand. It's about realizing that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. And even if the second love doesn't last forever, it leaves a different kind of mark. It teaches you what love is supposed to feel like. It shows you that you can love deeply without losing yourself, that you can stay soft without being naive, that healing doesn't mean closing your heart, it means choosing better. Your first love changes you, but your second love reminds you why you didn't give up on love in the first place. And that's why it hurts deeper, because this time you knew what you were risking and you loved anyway. What people don't tell you is that the second love doesn't just affect your heart, it reshapes the way you see everything. You're not the same person you were the first time you fell in love. You're more aware now, more cautious. You've seen how quickly things can change, how someone can promise forever and still walk away. So you love with your eyes open this time. You notice the small things, the tone shifts, the effort levels, the moments where silence says more than words ever could. You're not naive anymore, but you're not closed off either. And that's the dangerous balance, because part of you is still hopeful, still wanting to believe that this time will be different, that maybe this love will be the one that stays. And because you're loving with intention now, when it starts to slip, you feel it immediately. The second love hurts because you don't get blindsided. You see it coming. You sense the distance before it's spoken. You feel the warmth fade before it's gone. You recognize the patterns because you've lived them before, and yet you still stay longer than you should. Not because you're desperate, but because you understand love better now. You know relationships aren't perfect. You know people struggle. You try to be patient. You try to communicate. You try to fix instead of flee. That's what makes it cut deeper when it ends. Because you didn't love blindly. You loved consciously. You loved knowing the risk. The second love doesn't shatter you the way the first one does. It doesn't leave you confused about what went wrong. Instead, it leaves you quietly exhausted. You don't cry as loudly. You don't fall apart as dramatically. You just sit with this heavy realization that sometimes, even when you do things the right way, love can still end. And that's a different kind of pain. It's the pain of knowing you grew, healed, and tried again, and still didn't get the ending you hoped for. But it's also the pain that proves how strong you've become, because even after everything, you are still capable of opening your heart again. That matters more than you think. The second love stays with you in quieter ways, not as chaos, not as obsession, but as reflection. It makes you look at yourself differently, at the way you love, at the boundaries you set, at the parts of you that grew stronger and the parts that are still tender. You don't replay every moment wondering what you did wrong like the first time. Instead, you replay moments wondering how something that felt so healthy could still slip through your fingers, and that's when it hits you. Love isn't a guarantee. Effort doesn't come with insurance. Doing your best doesn't mean you'll always get to keep what you care about. That realization hurts, but it also matures you. You stop romanticizing pain. You stop thinking love has to be hard to be meaningful. You stop chasing people who can't meet you where you are. The second love teaches you discernment. It teaches you that chemistry isn't enough, that timing matters, that two good people can still be wrong for each other in that moment of life. And accepting that is one of the hardest lessons there is. You don't come out of it bitter, at least not if you're honest with yourself. You come out clearer. You know what you want now, what you won't tolerate, what you deserve without needing to explain it to anyone. And even though it didn't last, it didn't fail, it served its purpose. It showed you that love can feel safe, that connection can be calm, that you don't have to lose yourself to be close to someone. The second love doesn't destroy your belief in love, it refines it. It strips away the fantasy and leaves you with truth. And truth, even when it hurts, is always better than illusion. Because now, when love comes again, and it will, you won't be chasing it, you'll be choosing it. What makes the second love linger is how close it came to being right. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't built on illusion. It felt grounded, like something you could grow into, instead of something you were chasing. And that's why letting it go feels so unfair. You did the work this time. You showed up differently. You loved with awareness, and still it slipped away. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You start asking quieter questions. Not why wasn't I enough, but why wasn't this the right time? You realize that love isn't just about effort or intention. It's also about alignment. About two people being ready in the same season of life. And sometimes, no matter how real it feels, the timing just isn't there. The second love teaches you that endings don't always come from betrayal or lack of care. Sometimes they come from growth pulling people in different directions. From life demanding things one person is ready to give and the other isn't yet. And that kind of ending hurts because there's no villain to blame. You don't leave angry, you leave understanding, and that understanding weighs heavy. But here's the quiet truth. The second love doesn't close your heart, it strengthens it. It proves you're capable of loving again without losing yourself. It shows you that healing worked, that you didn't harden, that you didn't shut down. You took the risk again, knowing how badly it could hurt, and that courage matters because love isn't measured by how long it lasts. It's measured by how honestly it's given, and the second love is often the most honest version of you. Not perfect, not fearless, but real, and that's something no ending can take away. The second love changes how you carry yourself afterward. You don't walk away shattered, but you don't walk away untouched either. There's a quiet shift in you. You become softer in some places, stronger in others. You learn how to sit with loss without letting it turn into bitterness, and that balance takes time. You notice how you move differently now. You're slower to give access to your heart, but not closed. You're more honest about what you need, even if it risks someone leaving. You no longer stay silent just to keep the peace, because the second love taught you that losing yourself slowly is worse than losing someone quickly. You also learn that closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from acceptance, from realizing that you gave what you could with what you knew at the time, that both of you tried in the ways you knew how, and that an ending doesn't erase the good that existed. The memories don't hurt the same way anymore. They don't stab, they ache. And even that ache becomes familiar, manageable. It reminds you that you once felt safe with someone, and that means you can feel that way again. Maybe not with them, but with someone else, someday. The second love doesn't leave you afraid to love again. It leaves you prepared. You know what to look for now. You know the difference between attention and effort, between chemistry and compatibility, between wanting someone and being ready to build with them. And when love finds you again, because it will, you won't be chasing the feeling. You'll be recognizing calm, mutual, grounded, something that doesn't ask you to prove your worth or question your place. That's the quiet gift of the second love. It doesn't stay forever, but it stays with you in the way you love next. There's a moment after the second love ends where you realize you're not angry anymore. Not at them, not even at yourself. You're just tired. Tired in a way that only comes from caring deeply and trying your best. And that tiredness forces you to slow down and actually listen to yourself. You start asking different questions now. Not, how do I get them back? But why did I stay when I felt myself shrinking? You become more aware of the moments you ignored your intuition, the times your body knew before your heart was ready to admit it. And instead of beating yourself up for it, you start forgiving yourself for being human. The second love teaches you that loving someone doesn't mean abandoning yourself. That compromise shouldn't feel like self-erasure. That consistency matters more than intensity. And that someone can care about you deeply and still not be capable of loving you in the way you need. You also realize something else that's important. Just because a love ends doesn't mean it failed. Some connections are meant to show you a version of yourself you didn't know existed. A braver version, a more open version, a version that learned how to communicate, how to trust again, how to be vulnerable without losing control. And that version of you doesn't disappear when the relationship ends, it stays. You carry it into every interaction after, into the boundaries you set, into the standards you keep, into the way you walk away sooner when something doesn't feel right instead of forcing yourself to stay. The second love doesn't break you. It refines you. It teaches you how to love without fantasy, without desperation, without fear running the show. And even though it didn't last, it proves something important, that you're capable of loving in a healthy way. And once you know that, you never really lose. After the second love, you stop romanticizing ending. You understand that sometimes things don't fall apart loudly. They fade, they change shape. They quietly reach a point where staying would mean forcing something that's no longer aligned, and accepting that takes more strength than holding on ever did. You learn how to grieve without dramatizing. You let yourself miss them without wishing to undo the ending. You don't demonize what you adjust to make letting go easier. You honor it for what it was, meaningful, imperfect, and real. That kind of honesty with yourself is growth. You also become more intentional with your energy. You don't over-explain your feelings to people who aren't listening. You don't overextend yourself to prove your worth. You save your softness for those who handle it with care, because the second love taught you how valuable that softness actually is, and slowly, without forcing it, you start to feel whole again, not because someone replaced them, but because you learned how to stand on your own with everything you gained from loving. You realize that love didn't take anything from you. It gave you clarity, depth, emotional intelligence you didn't have before. The second love doesn't leave you empty, it leaves you wiser. You understand now that love isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing something real, knowing it could hurt, and still showing up with honesty. And when you're able to do that without losing yourself, that's when love becomes something powerful instead of fragile. You're not the same person you were before them. You're better prepared for what comes next. The second love stays with you not as pain, but as proof that your heart didn't close after being hurt. Proof that you didn't let fear turn you cold. Proof that even after disappointment, you were still willing to try again. And that matters more than whether it lasts, because the goal was never to avoid heartbreak forever. The goal was to love without losing yourself. And the second love showed you that you could be open without being reckless, vulnerable without being naive. You learned how to love with balance, and one day when love comes again, you'll feel the difference immediately. It won't feel rushed, it won't feel heavy, it won't feel like you're walking on eggshells or trying to prove your value. It'll feel mutual, steady, easy in a way that doesn't scare you. You won't be chasing a feeling anymore. You'll be choosing a person, and that's the quiet beauty of the second. It doesn't promise forever, it prepares you. It teaches you that love doesn't need to hurt to be meaningful, and that peace is just as powerful as passion. So if your second love didn't last, don't mourn it like a failure. See it for what it really was. A turning point, a lesson, a reminder that your heart is still capable of real connection. The first love opens your heart. The second love teaches it how to stay open. And whatever comes next, you'll be ready. I think the hardest thing to admit now is that I waited too long for her. Not a few days, not a few weeks. I'm talking about months of believing that eventually she would see me the way I saw her. Because when you really care about someone, patience feels like loyalty. You tell yourself that love isn't supposed to be rushed, that real connections take time, that sometimes people just need space to figure things out. So I gave her that space. I stayed patient when things felt uncertain. I stayed loyal even when the energy between us started shifting. And every time something felt off, I told myself the same thing. Just give it time. Time would make her realize how much I cared. Time would make the connection stronger. Time would make everything finally fall into place. But looking back now, I realize something painful. Sometimes time doesn't fix things. Sometimes time just shows you what someone was never going to choose. And while I was waiting, she was slowly moving in a different direction. Well, when you wait for someone you care about, it doesn't feel like you're wasting time. It feels like you're being loyal. You tell yourself that patience is proof that your feelings are real, that if you just stay consistent long enough, eventually they'll see what's right in front of them. So that's what I did. I stayed. Even when the signs started becoming confusing, there were moments where she would pull closer again. Moments where the conversations felt like they used to. Moments where she would say things that made it seem like maybe, just maybe, we were finally getting somewhere. And every time that happened, it reset my hope. It made me believe the waiting was worth it. Because hope is powerful. Hope convinces you that the future will eventually match the way you feel. But the problem with hope is that it can keep you standing in the same place while the other person is slowly walking somewhere else. And I didn't see that at the time, because while I was waiting for things to become clearer, she was slowly becoming less certain about us. And the scariest part is how quietly that shift happens. It doesn't start with a big moment. It starts with small changes, replies that come slower, conversations that feel shorter, energy that feels just a little different than before. At first you ignore it because you tell yourself the same thing you've been telling yourself the whole time. Just give it time. But sometimes time doesn't move people closer. Sometimes it slowly moves them away. And by the time you realize that, you've already waited longer than you should have. The strange thing about waiting for someone is that you don't realize how much time you're giving away until you look back at it. While I was waiting for her to figure out her feelings, my whole mindset was built around patience. I told myself that real connections take time, that people sometimes need space before they realize what's right in front of them. So whenever things felt uncertain, I convinced myself that uncertainty was just part of the process. I thought eventually she would see me the way I saw her, but the longer I waited, the more the relationship started feeling one-sided. Not in obvious ways. She still talked to me. She still checked in sometimes. She still kept the connection alive just enough that it never felt completely over. And that's the part that kept me there, because every small moment of closeness made it seem like progress. Like maybe we were finally moving towards something real. But looking back now, those moments didn't mean we were getting closer. They just meant she wasn't ready to fully let me go yet. And there's a big difference between someone building something with you and someone keeping you close while they're still figuring out what they want. At the time, I couldn't see that difference clearly. All I knew was that I cared about her, and I believed that eventually she would care about me the same way. So I stayed patient, even when the signs started becoming harder to ignore, even when the connection started feeling less stable than it used to. Because once you invest that much time waiting for someone, it becomes harder to walk away. You start telling yourself that leaving now would mean all that waiting was for nothing. So you stay longer, you give it more time, you hope just a little more, And that's how you end up realizing something painful later on. You didn't just wait for her. You waited too long. The hardest part about waiting too long for someone is realizing that the time you gave them was real, even if the outcome wasn't. Because every day I stayed patient, I believed it meant something. Every message I sent, every conversation where I tried to understand her better, every moment where I chose to stay instead of walking away when things felt uncertain, to me those moments were proof that I cared, proof that the connection mattered enough to fight for. But there's something difficult about waiting that you don't notice until it's already happened. Waiting slowly turns into hoping, and hoping slowly turns into ignoring reality. There were signs that things weren't moving the way I thought they were. Moments where her effort didn't match mine. Moments where the connection felt like it was staying in the same place instead of growing. Moments where it felt like I was investing more emotionally than she was. But every time I noticed those signs, I told myself the same thing. Just give it more time. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe the connection might not lead anywhere. You want to believe the patience will eventually pay off. But the truth is, patience only works when both people are moving toward the same thing. If one person is waiting while the other person is slowly drifting away, time doesn't bring you closer. It just stretches the distance. And by the time I started realizing that, I had already waited longer than I should have. Another thing about waiting too long for someone is how quietly it changes your life. Because when you're emotionally invested in someone, your decisions start revolving around them. You hold space for them in your future. You imagine what things could become. You avoid moving on because a part of you still believes they might eventually choose you. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't explore other connections. I didn't let myself get too close to anyone else because, in my mind, I was already committed to her, even if the relationship wasn't fully defined. And that's the trap of waiting. You stay emotionally loyal to someone who hasn't fully chosen you yet, not because you're naive, but because you believe loyalty will eventually be recognized. You believe that if someone sees how patient you are, how consistent you are, how much you care, they'll eventually realize you're the right person. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people appreciate your patience, sometimes they even care about you, but that doesn't always mean they'll choose you. And that's a painful thing to understand, because it means the time you gave them didn't guarantee the future you imagined. And when that realization finally hits, you start asking yourself a difficult question. Was I waiting for the right person? Or was I waiting for someone who was never going to choose me in the first place? Once I started asking myself that question honestly, everything began to look different. Because when you stop looking at the situation through hope, you start seeing it through clarity. And clarity shows you things you didn't want to notice before. Like how often I was the one reaching out first, how often I was the one trying to keep the connection alive, how often I was the one convincing myself that things would eventually work out. At the time, I thought that was just what patience looked like, but now I understand something important. Patience in a relationship only makes sense when both people are building something together. If only one person is investing time, effort, and emotional energy, that's not patience. That's imbalance. And I was standing in that imbalance longer than I should have, because I kept believing that eventually the effort would be returned. Eventually the connection would stabilize. Eventually she would see me the same way I saw her, but eventually never came. And the hardest part about realizing that isn't just the heartbreak. It's realizing how much time you spent waiting for something that was never truly moving toward you. For a while, that realization made me feel foolish, because it made me feel like I should have known sooner, like I should have seen the signs earlier, like I should have walked away the moment things started feeling uncertain. But the truth is, caring about someone doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. When you believe in someone, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to believe their uncertainty is temporary. You want to believe the connection you feel will eventually become mutual, so you stay longer, you give more time, you hope a little harder, and sometimes that hope leads to something real. But sometimes it just leads to a lesson. And the lesson I learned is something I'll never forget. You shouldn't have to wait indefinitely for someone to recognize your value. If someone truly sees you as part of their future, they don't leave you standing in uncertainty for months. They choose you, and they show that choice through their actions. Once I understood that, the pain started changing into something else. Perspective. Because waiting too long for someone doesn't mean you were weak. It means you believed in the possibility of something meaningful. And there's nothing wrong with believing in people, but there's a difference between believing in someone and ignoring the reality of their actions, because actions always tell the truth eventually. Someone who truly wants you doesn't keep you waiting forever. They don't keep you guessing about where you stand. They don't keep you in a place where you feel like you're hoping more than you're building. They make their intentions clear, and if someone doesn't do that, the waiting only leads to one outcome. Eventually you realize you were holding space for someone who wasn't holding space for you. When I finally stopped waiting for her, something surprising happened. I started getting my clarity back. Because when you're waiting for someone emotionally, a part of your life feels paused. Your focus stays tied to the possibility of what could happen. Your decisions revolve around the connection. Your energy stays invested in someone who might not even be moving in the same direction. But the moment you stop waiting, everything shifts. You start seeing things more objectively. You start realizing how much emotional energy you were giving to someone who wasn't fully present, and you start understanding something important. The time you spent waiting wasn't wasted. It taught you exactly what you should never accept again. Looking back now, I can honestly say I waited too long for her, but I don't regret caring. I don't regret being patient, because those things say something about who I am. What I do regret is staying in uncertainty longer than I should have, because the right person doesn't make you wait forever to feel chosen. They don't keep you in a constant state of hoping. They don't make you question whether the connection is real. They make their intentions clear. They meet your effort with their own, and they move forward with you, not away from you. So yeah, I waited too long for her, but that experience taught me something I'll carry with me forever. Next time I won't stay in a place where I feel like I'm waiting to be chosen, because the right connection doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like moving forward together. She said she needed space, and I believed her, because when someone says that, you don't question it, you respect it. You tell yourself they're overwhelmed, they're figuring things out, they just need time to clear their head. So I gave her that. I didn't chase, I didn't pressure her, I didn't try to force conversations that she clearly wasn't ready to have. I stepped back, because in my head, that's what you do when you care about someone. You don't make things harder for them, you give them room. But what I didn't realize at the time was this: she didn't need space, she just didn't want me. At first I handled it the way you're supposed to. I gave her distance, I stopped texting first, I stopped trying to keep conversations alive. I let the silence sit, even when it didn't feel right, because I thought space meant something temporary, like a pause, like something we would come back from. But the silence started stretching longer than it should have, and instead of clarity, it just created confusion. Because when someone genuinely needs space, they don't disappear without direction. They don't leave you guessing. They don't make you feel like you're suddenly a stranger. But that's exactly how it started to feel. And deep down, something didn't sit right. Not because I didn't trust her, but because the energy didn't match what she said. Then little things started adding up. Things I didn't notice right away. But once I did, I couldn't ignore them. She wasn't just taking space. She was still active, still talking, still posting, still present, just not with me. And that's when the confusion turned into something else, clarity, because space doesn't mean disappearing from one person while still being available for everything else. Space doesn't look like selective silence, and that's when it hit me. She didn't need space from everything, she needed space from me. That realization is different, because now it's not about understanding, it's about acceptance. You start replaying everything, trying to figure out when it changed, when her energy shifted, when the connection stopped being something she wanted to maintain. Because if it was really about space, she would have come back, she would have explained, she would have made it clear where things stood, but she didn't. She just faded and let the silence say what she didn't want to say directly. And the truth is, space is one of the easiest ways to leave without saying you're leaving. It sounds soft, it sounds understandable, it doesn't create conflict, but sometimes it's just distance in disguise, a way to slowly step out without having to take responsibility for ending it. And I didn't want to see it like that at first, because believing her felt easier than accepting what was actually happening. Because if I accepted it, then I had to admit something I wasn't ready for, that I wasn't someone she was trying to hold on to. I was someone she was slowly letting go of. And that's a different kind of pain, because it's quiet. There's no argument, no clear ending, just distance that keeps growing until you finally understand what it means. For a while I kept thinking she'd come back, that once she had her space, things would go back to how they were, because when something feels real, you don't expect it to end like that. You expect a conversation, closure, something, but sometimes the absence is the answer. And that's what I had to learn the hard way. And once I stopped waiting, everything started making more sense, because I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't questioning where I stood. I wasn't trying to interpret silence. I just saw it for what it was. She didn't need time. She made a decision, just not one she wanted to say out loud. And yeah, that hurts. Not just because she left, but because of how she did it. Because honesty would have been easier to respect, clarity would have been easier to accept, but instead, I was left trying to understand something that was never explained, and that kind of ending stays with you for a while. So yeah, she said she needed space, but what she really needed was distance from me, and now I understand something clearly. The right person doesn't disappear to figure out if they want you. They don't leave you in silence, they don't make you question everything. They communicate, they stay, they choose. So next time, I won't confuse silence with patience. I won't wait around for someone who already stepped away, because when someone truly wants you, they don't need space to decide it. I knew it wasn't going to last, not because they said it, not because there were red flags everywhere, but because something in me never fully relaxed. Even in the good moments, there was a quiet voice saying, "Don't get too attached." I enjoyed it. I smiled, I played my part, but deep down, I felt the expiration date, and that's the weirdest kind of heartbreak. When you see the ending while you're still in the middle, sometimes your intuition whispers long before reality confirms it. There weren't major fights, no dramatic betrayals, no obvious reason to leave, but there was inconsistency, little things, energy that shifted slightly, effort that felt uneven, words that didn't fully match actions, and instead of confronting it, I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself to relax, to just enjoy the moment, to stop looking for problems, but intuition doesn't shout. It nudges, it tightens your chest a little, it makes you hesitate before getting attached, it keeps you half guarded even when things seem fine, and I felt that, I just ignored it, because sometimes we don't want to be right, we want to be wrong about the ending, so why did I stay if I knew? Because sometimes temporary love still feels better than loneliness, because even if it wasn't forever, it was something. The late night conversations, the inside jokes, the way they looked at me when it was just us. I knew it had cracks, but I also knew it had moments, and I convinced myself that maybe moments were enough. Maybe I didn't need permanence. Maybe I didn't need certainty. Maybe I could just enjoy it without expecting it to stay. But that's the lie we tell ourselves. You can't emotionally invest and pretend you won't feel it when it ends. I stayed because I hoped my intuition would be wrong. I stayed because I liked them, because I wanted it to work, because walking away early felt dramatic, but sometimes staying longer just makes the goodbye heavier. There's a difference between anxiety and intuition. Anxiety is loud, it spirals, it imagines worst-case scenarios, it creates problems that don't exist yet. Intuition is quiet, it doesn't panic, it doesn't overreact, it just knows. And what I felt wasn't panic, it wasn't jealousy, it wasn't insecurity. It was a steady awareness that something wasn't aligned. I didn't feel chosen, I didn't feel secure, I didn't feel like we were building. I felt like we were passing time, and that's how you know. When the connection feels temporary, even while it's happening. Anxiety asks, what if they leave? Intuition says, they're not fully here. And deep down I knew which one it was. Knowing it won't last doesn't make it hurt less. That's the part nobody tells you. You'd think being mentally prepared would soften the blow. It doesn't, because even if your mind saw the ending, your heart still participated. You still laughed, still opened up, still imagined what if. And when it finally ends, there's no satisfaction in being right. There's no relief in saying, I knew it. There's just grief. Grief for the version of it you hope might surprise you. Grief for the effort you still gave even while doubting. Grief for the potential that never turned into permanence. Knowing doesn't protect you. It just makes you feel like you watched crash in slow motion. And sometimes that's worse. Should I have walked away sooner? Maybe. But it's easy to say that now. When you're in it, you don't see it as wasting time. You see it as giving it a chance. You tell yourself, maybe it just needs more time. Maybe they're just figuring things out. Maybe I'm overthinking. Because walking away early feels extreme. It feels impatient. It feels like you're not fighting hard enough. But sometimes staying longer isn't loyalty. It's fear. Fear of starting over. Fear of being alone again. Fear that this might be the closest thing to love you'll get for a while. So you stay, not because it's right, but because it's comfortable enough. And when it finally ends, you don't just grieve them. You grieve the time you knew better, but here's the thing. You didn't stay because you're weak. You stayed because you hoped, and hope isn't something to be ashamed of. Next time I'll trust it, that quiet feeling, that subtle hesitation, that inner voice that doesn't panic, it just knows. Because ignoring it didn't protect me, it just delayed the inevitable. Next time, I won't wait for proof. I won't wait for the obvious red flag. I won't wait for the dramatic ending. I won't wait until I'm already attached. If something feels temporary, I'll ask why. If something feels uneven, I won't convince myself it's balanced. If someone feels half in, I won't invest fully. Not from a place of fear, from a place of alignment. Because intuition isn't there to ruin good things, it's there to protect you from forcing the wrong ones. And maybe I needed this ending to finally respect my own instincts. Not every connection is meant to last. Some are meant to wake you up to your patterns, to your boundaries, to the things you tolerate when you're lonely. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be forever. Maybe it was supposed to show you what half effort feels like so you'd stop accepting it. Maybe it was supposed to teach you that chemistry isn't compatibility, that attention isn't intention, that potential isn't commitment. Sometimes we meet people who aren't meant to stay. They're meant to reveal. Reveal where you overgive, where you ignore yourself, where you settle for almost, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So maybe it didn't last because it wasn't designed to build. It was designed to redirect. Endings don't always mean failure. Sometimes they mean clarity. We think if something doesn't last forever, it wasn't real, but that's not true. It was real. The feelings were real. The moments were real. It just wasn't permanent. And permanence isn't the only measure of value. Some connections exist to shift you, to sharpen your awareness, to strengthen your boundaries, to remind you what you need and what you'll never accept again. It didn't fail, it finished, and there's a difference. Failure feels like you did something wrong. Finish feels like it served its purpose, and maybe that's what this was. Not a waste, not a mistake, just a chapter that reached its natural end. I used to think knowing it wouldn't last was a weakness, like I was pessimistic, like I was sabotaging it, like I couldn't just enjoy something good. But now I see it differently. That feeling was awareness. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't insecure. I was aligned enough with myself to recognize misalignment, and that's power, because next time I won't silence it. I won't stay longer than I should just to prove I can make something work. I won't ignore the quiet voice just because the moments feel nice. Knowing it wouldn't last didn't mean I didn't care. It meant I could see clearly, and clarity is growth, so no, it didn't last, but I did. I walked away more aware, more grounded, more in tune with myself, and next time, if it's meant to last, I won't have to convince myself of it. I'll feel that too. Chose him over me, and the crazy part is, it didn't happen in one moment. It happened slowly. At first it was small things. Her replies got shorter. Her attention started drifting. The way she used to look at me started changing. Not dramatically, just enough that something felt off. But when you love someone, you don't immediately assume the worst. You assume they're stressed, busy, tired. You give them the benefit of the doubt. So I stayed patient. I stayed consistent. I kept showing up the same way I always did. Because when I commit to someone, I don't suddenly change just because things get complicated. But what I didn't realize at the time was this. While I was trying to hold the relationship together, someone else was slowly stepping into it, not all at once. Just little by little, more conversations, more attention, more curiosity. And attention is powerful because attention turns into interest. Interest turns into emotional space, and emotional space turns into attachment. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late, because she didn't just choose him in a moment, she chose him through 100 small decisions. Every time she answered his message faster than mine, every time she gave him the version of her that used to be mine, every time she let his presence grow while mine slowly shrank. And the hardest part, I wasn't competing in a fair race, because I didn't even know there was a race. I thought we were building something together, but she was quietly deciding between two directions, and eventually, she chose his, not because I didn't care, not because I didn't try, but because somewhere along the way my presence became familiar, and his attention felt new, and novelty is powerful when someone isn't fully anchored anymore. So one day it became official, not dramatic, not explosive, just final. She chose him. And suddenly I went from being the person she talked to every day to someone watching from a distance, and that's a strange feeling. To realize that someone who once chose you completely can eventually choose someone else instead. The part people don't talk about when someone chooses someone else is the confusion. Not just the pain, the confusion, because your mind starts replaying everything, every conversation, every memory, every moment that felt real. And you start asking questions that don't have clear answers. Was she already talking to him while she was telling me she loved me? Did she start losing feelings months before I noticed? Was I fighting for something that had already quietly ended? Because when someone chooses another person, it doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites your memories. You start looking back at moments that once felt normal and wondering if they meant something else. That night she seemed distant. That time she smiled at her phone. That random argument that came out of nowhere. At the time, none of it seemed like a big deal, but after she chose him, everything starts connecting in ways you wish it didn't, and suddenly it feels like you were the last person to realize the relationship was already changing. That's the hardest part. Feeling like you were still building something while the other person was slowly detaching from it, because while I was trying to fix things, she was deciding between two futures, one with me and one without me, and eventually she picked the one that didn't include me, and I'm not gonna lie, that hits your ego, it makes you question your value, you start comparing yourself to someone you've never even met. What does he have that I don't? Is he more exciting, more confident, more interesting? Did she get bored of me? Did I become too predictable? Your mind searches for reasons because your heart needs an explanation. But sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Sometimes people don't leave because you weren't enough. Sometimes they leave because someone new made them feel something different. And different can be powerful when someone isn't fully grounded in what they already have, because new attention feels exciting, New conversations feel fresh. New people don't carry the history of arguments or mistakes, and that freshness can create the illusion of something better, but illusions don't show the full picture, they only show the beginning. Still, knowing that doesn't always make it easier, because when someone chooses someone else over you, it feels like a verdict, like a decision about your worth. But the reality is this: it wasn't a competition about who was better, it was a decision about who she felt more drawn to at that moment. And attraction, timing, and emotion are messy things. They don't always follow logic. So yeah, she chose him, and for a while that felt like proof that I lost. But over time I started realizing something important. Just because someone chooses a different path doesn't mean you weren't valuable. Sometimes it just means they weren't meant to stay on yours. The hardest part about her choosing him wasn't just losing her. It was realizing I couldn't compete with something I never saw coming because I was focused on us. I wasn't looking around for other options. I wasn't measuring her against someone new. I wasn't wondering if someone else could replace her. I was invested fully. So when I found out she chose him, it felt like the ground shifted under something I thought was stable. And stability is something you don't question until it disappears. When things feel secure, you stop worrying about losing them. You assume the foundation is strong, but sometimes what feels strong to you is already cracking for someone else. And the scary part is you don't always see those cracks when they start forming, because they don't begin as huge problems. They begin quietly. Less excitement in conversations, less curiosity about your day, less emotional presence, tiny changes that seem harmless at first, but those small shifts slowly create emotional distance. And distance creates space, and space is where someone new can enter. I didn't realize how much space had formed between us until someone else filled it, and by the time I noticed, the emotional balance had already shifted, because attention changes people. When someone new shows interest, it creates a different kind of energy. New validation, new curiosity, new excitement. And if someone isn't fully anchored in what they already have, that new energy can start pulling them away. That's the part nobody warns you about. Sometimes relationships don't end because something terrible happened. Sometimes they end because someone new arrived at the wrong time. And suddenly what felt comfortable starts feeling routine. What felt stable starts feeling predictable, and predictability can feel boring to someone chasing excitement. But what hurts the most is realizing this: I never got the chance to compete fairly because I wasn't competing at all. I thought I was building something solid, while she was slowly deciding whether she still wanted it. And once someone starts questioning the connection, everything changes. Their energy changes, their priorities shift, their attention moves, and eventually their choice becomes clear. She chose him, and I was left trying to understand how something that once felt mutual could suddenly feel one-sided. After she chose him, something strange happened inside my head. At first it was anger, not loud anger, not the kind where you yell or send messages you regret. The quiet kind, the kind that makes you stare at the ceiling at night wondering how everything changed so fast. Because when someone chooses someone else over you, it feels like a judgment, like a decision about your value, and that's where your mind goes first. You start comparing yourself to someone you've never even met. Is he better than me? Does he make her laugh more? Does he understand her in ways I couldn't? Did she see something in him that she stopped seeing in me? Your brain starts building a version of this person that's somehow superior in every way. But the truth is, most of those comparisons are imaginary, because you're not actually comparing yourself to him. You're comparing yourself to the idea of him, the version of him that exists in your mind. And that version always looks unbeatable, because when you're hurt, your brain automatically assumes you lost to someone better. But relationships aren't competitions, they're choices, and choices aren't always logical. Sometimes people choose someone because the timing feels different. Sometimes they choose someone because the energy feels new. Sometimes they choose someone simply because they're in a different emotional place. None of that automatically means you are less valuable, but in the moment it definitely feels like it does, because rejection has a way of shrinking your confidence. It makes you forget who you were before the situation happened. Before she chose him, I knew exactly who I was. Someone loyal, someone consistent, someone who showed up even when things weren't easy. But when she chose him, for a while, it made me question all of that. It made me wonder if loyalty was boring, if consistency was predictable, if stability was something she stopped appreciating. And those thoughts are dangerous, because when someone leaves you for someone else, the easiest trap to fall into is believing you weren't enough. But the truth is this: someone choosing a different person doesn't erase the way you loved them. It doesn't erase the effort you gave. It doesn't erase the value you brought to the relationship. It only means one thing. At that moment in her life, she felt pulled in a different direction. Yeah, that hurts, because nobody wants to be the direction someone walks away from. But sometimes the person who walks away is simply walking towards something they think they need to experience. And that doesn't automatically mean you were the wrong person. Sometimes it just means you weren't the final chapter in their story. After a while, the anger fades. Not completely, but enough that something else starts replacing it. Reflection. Because once the shock of being replaced settles, you start looking back at the relationship differently. You stop asking, why did she choose him? And you start asking something more honest. When did she start drifting away? Because choices like that rarely happen overnight. They build slowly, little emotional shifts that you barely notice in the moment, conversations that feel shorter, moments that feel less connected, energy that feels slightly different. At first you ignore it, because when you love someone, your instinct isn't to assume the worst, your instinct is to trust them. So when something feels off, you tell yourself it's temporary. Maybe she's stressed, maybe she's tired, maybe she just needs space. But sometimes those small changes aren't temporary. Sometimes they're the early signs that someone's feelings are shifting. And the hardest part about that realization is this: you can be doing everything right, and someone can still start emotionally leaving. I showed up the same way I always did. I was consistent, I listened, I tried to support her when things got hard. But sometimes relationships don't end because someone did something wrong. Sometimes they end because someone starts feeling something different. And feelings don't always follow logic. That's the uncomfortable truth. Because when someone chooses someone else, it feels like a failure, like you must have done something wrong. But relationships aren't math equations. You can do everything right and still lose someone who simply felt pulled in another direction. And that's the part that takes the longest to accept, because your mind keeps looking for a mistake you could fix, a moment you could redo, a conversation you could handle differently. But sometimes there isn't a moment like that. Sometimes someone simply grows into a different version of themselves, and that version chooses a different path. And yeah, that realization hurts, because it means you can't undo it. You can't argue someone back into choosing you. You can't compete for someone who already decided once someone makes that choice. The only thing left for you to do is face the reality of it. She chose him. And for a while that felt like the end of my story, but eventually I realized something important. It was just the end of that chapter. After enough time passes, the pain starts changing shape. It's still there, but it's quieter. Not because what happened didn't matter, but because you slowly start seeing the situation from a different angle. At first, when she chose him, it felt like I lost. Like I had been replaced, like everything I gave somehow wasn't enough to make her stay. But the longer I sat with that feeling, the more I started realizing something important. Being chosen isn't something you can force. No amount of effort can make someone choose you if their heart is leaning somewhere else. And that's a hard truth to accept, because when you love someone, you want to believe effort is enough. You want to believe loyalty matters. You want to believe consistency will eventually win. But sometimes the person you're giving all of that to is already drifting emotionally. And when someone's heart starts drifting, effort doesn't pull them back the way you hope it will. It just delays the inevitable. Looking back now, I started noticing things I didn't fully understand at the time. Moments where she felt distant. Moments where the connection felt slightly different. Not broken, just weaker. But when you're inside the relationship, you don't see those moments as warnings. You see them as temporary. You assume things will go back to normal because that's what love does. It makes you hopeful. But sometimes hope keeps you holding on to something that someone else has already started letting go of, and that's the painful imbalance. One person still trying to build, the other person quietly preparing to leave. So when she finally chose him, it felt sudden to me, but maybe for her that decision had been forming long before the moment it actually happened, and realizing that helped me understand something I didn't want to accept at first. I didn't lose her in a single moment. I lost her slowly over time. Realizing I lost her slowly instead of all at once changed the way I saw everything, because for a while I kept replaying the moment she chose him like it was the exact second everything ended. But the truth is, endings like that rarely happen in one moment. They happen in stages. First the energy changes, then the attention shifts, then the emotional connection weakens, and eventually the decision just confirms what was already happening beneath the surface. Looking back, I started seeing things more clearly. There were moments where she seemed distracted, moments where our conversations felt less alive, moments where it felt like I was talking to someone who was physically there, but emotionally somewhere else. At the time, I didn't question it too much, because when you trust someone, you don't immediately assume they're drifting away. You assume things will stabilize again. You assume whatever feels off is temporary. But sometimes those moments aren't temporary. Sometimes they're the beginning of the emotional distance that eventually turns into separation. And when someone new enters the picture during that distance, everything accelerates, because now the attention they used to give you is being shared with someone else. And attention is powerful. Where attention goes, feelings follow. That's the part people don't realize until it's too late. Relationships don't only end because of arguments or big betrayals. Sometimes they end because someone else slowly starts occupying emotional space that used to belong to you. And once that space is filled, the connection you had starts shrinking. Not because you stopped trying, but because their focus shifted. And when someone's focus shifts, their feelings usually follow. So when she finally chose him, it felt sudden to me. But maybe it wasn't sudden at all. Maybe it was just the final step in something that had been changing quietly for a long time, and accepting that wasn't easy, because it meant admitting that the relationship I thought I still had was already fading before I realized it. Once I accepted that the relationship had been fading before the moment she chose him, something else started changing inside me. The story in my head started shifting. At first, the story was simple. She chose him because I wasn't enough. That thought sits heavy when someone leaves you for someone else, because it makes it feel like a comparison you lost, like you were weighed against someone else and came up short. But the more time passed, the more I started questioning that narrative, because if I'm honest with myself, I know who I was in that relationship. I was loyal, I was present, I showed up when things weren't easy, I stayed even when conversations got difficult, and those things don't suddenly lose value just because someone decides to walk away. Sometimes people don't leave because you were lacking something. Sometimes they leave because they're searching for something different, different timing, different energy, different experiences. And when someone is searching for something different, the person they leave behind isn't always the problem. They're just not the direction that person wants to move in anymore. That realization doesn't erase the pain instantly, but it does change the way you carry it, because instead of feeling like you lost a competition, you start realizing that you were simply part of someone else's journey, a chapter, not the entire story. And yeah, that can be hard to accept at first, because when you're in love, you don't imagine yourself as just a chapter. You imagine yourself as the ending, but life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people walk into your life for a season, they teach you something, they change you in ways you didn't expect, and then they move on to a different path. And when that happens, the choice they make isn't always about your worth. Sometimes it's simply about their direction. She chose him, but that doesn't mean I was someone unworthy of being chosen. It just means her path went somewhere else. By the time enough time passed, the pain stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling more like clarity, because when someone chooses someone else over you, it forces you to confront something uncomfortable. You can't control who someone chooses. You can't convince someone to value what they've already started letting go of, and you definitely can't compete for someone who's already made their decision. For a long time, I thought about what I could have done differently. Maybe I could have been more exciting, maybe I could have been more unpredictable, maybe I could have noticed the distance sooner, but eventually I realized something important. Even if I had done everything perfectly, the outcome might have been the same, because when someone's feelings start shifting, they don't always shift because of something you did wrong. Sometimes they shift because that person is changing, their priorities change, their emotions change, the things they're drawn to change. And when that happens, the person they once chose can slowly stop feeling like the person they want to keep choosing. That doesn't mean the connection was fake, it just means it wasn't permanent. And once I understood that, something inside me relaxed, not because it stopped hurting, but because I stopped trying to rewrite the past. I stopped trying to find the exact moment where everything could have been saved, because sometimes relationships don't end because of a single mistake. Sometimes they end because two people slowly start walking in different directions, and when that happens, no amount of effort can force the paths back together. She chose him, and for a long time, that sentence felt like the worst thing that could have happened to me. But eventually I started realizing something else. If someone can choose someone else over you, then they were never meant to be the person who chooses you forever. And that realization hurts at first, but it also frees you, because it reminds you that being chosen by the wrong person isn't the goal. Being chosen by the right person is. Looking back now, the moment she chose him doesn't define me the way it used to. At first it felt like proof that I lost something important, but over time I realized something different. I didn't lose my ability to love, I didn't lose my loyalty, I didn't lose the way I show up for people when I care about them. Those things didn't disappear just because one person decided to walk away. The only thing that changed was the direction my life was moving in. And maybe that direction was always meant to change, because the truth is, relationships aren't about holding on to someone who no longer chooses you. They're about eventually finding someone who continues choosing you, not once, not only when things feel easy, but again and again. Through the normal days, through the difficult conversations, through the moments where excitement fades and what's left is commitment. And if someone can walk away from you for someone else, it simply means they weren't the person who was going to make that kind of commitment. She chose him, and that used to feel like the end of my story. Now it just feels like a moment that redirected it, because one day someone else will choose me, and when they do, it won't feel like a competition, it'll feel like certainty. I don't think I've ever been someone's first choice, not immediately, not without hesitation. I've been liked, wanted, texted every day, but when it came down to it, there was always a pause, let me think, I'm not sure what I want, the timing isn't right, and you start noticing a pattern. You're good enough to keep around, good enough to talk to, good enough to feel close to, but not good enough to be picked without doubt, and that does something to you. Because you don't want to compete. You don't want to prove yourself. You don't want to convince someone to see what's already there. You just want one person who doesn't hesitate, one person who doesn't compare you, doesn't explore other options, doesn't need to figure it out, just chooses you. And when that hasn't happened yet, the question creeps in quietly. Is there something about me that makes people unsure? When you're never the first choice, you start overperforming. You become extra understanding, extra patient, extra available. You respond faster. You give more reassurance. You try to be easier to love. Because maybe if you're perfect enough, they won't hesitate. Maybe if you don't complain, don't ask for too much, don't pressure them, they'll finally pick you confidently. So you adjust. You downplay your needs. You accept the bare minimum. You tell yourself you're just being mature. But really, you're trying to secure a spot. You're trying to prove that you're worth choosing. And the painful part is this: even when you give your best, even when you're thoughtful, loyal, consistent, they still hesitate. And that's when it hits. It was never about you not doing enough. It was about them not being sure. And no amount of overperforming can fix someone else's uncertainty. After a while, it stops feeling like coincidence. It starts feeling like proof. Proof that maybe you're missing something, that maybe there's a quality you don't have, that maybe you're just almost exciting enough, almost attractive enough, almost unforgettable. And when you sit with that long enough, it begins to chip at your confidence. You start comparing yourself to the people they did choose. What do they have that I don't? What do they do differently? Why was it easier to commit to them? And the dangerous part? You begin to rewrite yourself in your head. Maybe I'm too available, too soft, too deep, or maybe not enough of something else. So you question your personality, your timing, your worth. But here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Someone else's preference is not a measurement of your value. You can be incredible and still not be someone's first choice. Not because you're lacking, but because alignment isn't forced. And just because someone didn't see you clearly doesn't mean you weren't clear. It just means they weren't your person. At some point you get tired, not bitter, not angry, just tired. Tired of feeling like you're competing without signing up for a competition. Tired of being compared to other options. Tired of waiting for someone to decide. Tired of proving you're worth choosing. And something shifts. You stop trying to outshine anyone. You stop adjusting yourself to win. You stop playing it cool just to stay in the running. Because love isn't supposed to feel like auditions. You shouldn't have to outperform someone to be valued. You shouldn't have to worry about whether you're the best option available. You either align or you don't. And once you realize that, you stop competing. You don't fight for a spot. You don't beg to be prioritized. You don't argue your value. You just observe. If someone's unsure, that's your answer. Not because you're not enough, but because you refuse to be an option. And the moment you stop competing, you stop feeling small, because you remember something important. You're not here to be the best choice in a lineup. You're here to be the only choice for the right person. The moment you refuse to compete, your standards rise automatically. You stop accepting, let's see where this goes. You stop entertaining mixed signals. You stop tolerating being someone's backup plan. Because if someone has to compare you, they're not aligned with you. It's that simple. You don't need to be better than anyone else. You don't need to win. You don't need to outperform. You just need someone who sees you and doesn't hesitate. And once you decide you're no longer an option, you start moving differently. You don't over-explain. You don't over-give. You don't overstay. If someone's energy feels unsure, you don't chase clarity, you step back, not to play games, not to test them, but because you value yourself enough to not beg for certainty. And here's the truth. The right person won't need alternatives. They won't weigh you against other options. They won't keep you around while exploring. They'll know. And when you finally believe you deserve that kind of clarity, you stop asking, Why am I never the first choice? Because you realize you were just giving your energy to people who weren't capable of choosing fully. Being someone's second option was never your identity. It was a season, a pattern you tolerated, a dynamic you accepted, a lesson you hadn't learned yet, but it was never who you are. You weren't born to compete for attention. You weren't designed to be compared. You weren't meant to sit around waiting for someone to decide if you're enough. That was just a chapter, and chapters end. What you thought was rejection was actually redirection. Because imagine being fully chosen by someone who had to debate it. Imagine building something with someone who once hesitated. That foundation would always feel shaky. So maybe not being first protected you from being second in someone's heart. Maybe every time someone paused, it was life removing you from something that wasn't certain. You weren't overlooked, you were misaligned. And misalignment isn't failure, it's filtering. You're not destined to be the second option. You were just learning what it feels like, so you'd never accept it again. Everything changes when you stop identifying as the almost. You stop saying, this always happens to me. You stop expecting to be overlooked. Stop bracing for hesitation. Stop assuming you'll be compared. Because when you carry the identity of being second, you unconsciously accept second place behavior. You tolerate inconsistency. You excuse uncertainty. You stay longer than you should. But the moment you decide that's not who you are, your tolerance drops. You don't romanticize mixed signals. You don't wait around for someone to decide. You don't attach yourself to potential. You start moving like someone who expects clarity, and that energy is different. You ask direct questions. You communicate directly. You walk away directly, not because you're cold, because you're done being confused. You're not almost. You're not maybe. You're not will see. You're either fully chosen or you're unavailable. And once you internalize that, the pattern breaks because you no longer accept roles that don't fit you. Being someone's first choice starts with being confident enough to walk away. Because if you're afraid to lose them, you'll accept almost. You'll accept, I'm not ready. You'll accept, I need time. You'll accept being kept around while they figure it out. Not because you're weak, but because you don't want to lose the connection. But here's the shift. The moment you realize you're okay walking away, you stop settling for hesitation. You stop clinging to potential. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop staying where you feel unsure. And that energy changes everything. You don't threaten to leave. You don't play games. You just won't stay where you're not certain. And when someone feels that, they either step up or they step out. Both are clarity, because being someone's first choice isn't about demanding it. It's about being willing to lose anything that doesn't offer it. And once you're strong enough to walk away from confusion, you stop ending up in it. The right person won't make you question your position. You won't have to decode their text. You won't have to wonder where you stand. You won't have to compete with silence. When someone is sure about you, it shows in consistency, in effort, in how they talk about you, in how they prioritize you. There's no gray area, and that's what you've been missing. Not love, not attraction, not chemistry, clarity. Because every time you felt like you weren't the first choice, it wasn't because you lacked something, it was because the situation lacked certainty. The right connection won't feel like a tryout. It won't feel like you're waiting for results. It won't feel like you're one option among many. It will feel stable, secure, intentional. And when you experience that, you'll realize something important. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. So why was I never the first choice? The truth, because I was entertaining people who weren't capable of choosing fully. It was never about my worth, never about me lacking something, never about me being second best. It was about alignment. I was trying to be first in rooms where I was only an option. And once I stopped accepting that role, everything changed. I don't compete anymore. I don't overperform. I don't wait to be picked. If someone hesitates, I step back. If someone compares, I remove myself. If someone isn't sure, I let them find certainty somewhere else. Because I finally understand something. The right person won't struggle to choose me. They won't need alternatives. They won't need time to decide if I'm enough. They won't treat me like a possibility. They'll treat me like a decision. And until that shows up, I'm not missing out. I'm filtering. So I'm done asking, why am I never the first choice? Now the question is simpler. If I'm not your first choice, why are you still an option for me? And that's the shift.